Pavliak! Thank you, everybody, for tuning into another episode of the Kevin Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the best fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who at one point owned Erik Karlsson in their keeper pools. I'm your host, Elon Dubrowski. With me, as always, Brian Calm.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the show. And actually, we've had so many editions that we are now, well, actually, it's not, okay, I already blew it. Okay, going again. And we're so excited to bring you this, and thank you for always listening. Also, we recently passed the 500,000 download mark for the show. That is a lot of people listening to us for a long time. So we really appreciate that. And Elon, I think there's also a point of clarity that we need to get out of the way right this instant. What requires, what are the parameters for the yes at the start? Because it morphed it into the initial yes, into fun stuff, and then player names. But Pavliak? There's no yes in Pavliak.
But there is a yeah. So it's like most of the word. Pavliak. That counts, I think.
More like Pavliak.
You know, all right. Well, we'll get to that in the show. We'll see if he's Pavliak or Pavliak.
I'm just kidding. I'm just antagonizing right off the bat.
Yeah, okay. Well, hey, it's been, what did you say, 500,000 downloads? We got to give these people something new. They're going to go download another show 500,000 times. So got to keep it fresh. We got a lot for you guys today. Big, long list of players we want to talk about, all the news that happened last week. Matthew in the chat room here is shaming us for saying at one point owning Erik Karlsson in our keeper pools. You know what? Our keeper pools folded. It's not like we chose no longer to keep Karlsson. Like, sometimes a pool ends. You got to start a new pool. I tried to draft. You guys heard the story. I tried to draft Karlsson. I got sniped on him in the first round, like 5th overall. What could I do? Okay. Brian, before we get into everything, let's mention that we are presented by DubberHockey.com, the best fantasy hockey website out there, which is like a very important resource to use as you're heading towards your fantasy hockey playoffs. You've got all of the articles every day. It's time to read your daily ramblings, right? Every morning, that should be part of your routine. You wake up, you brush your teeth, you read the daily ramblings, because that's what's going to give you all the tidbits from the previous night to help you decide, what pickups do you need to make, any moves that you might want to make in order to be set for the fantasy hockey playoffs and take yourself to a championship. Also, of course, the line combinations and starting goalies, everything you need. It's all there at DobberHockey.com.
Yeah, as well as Dobber's mid-season fantasy hockey guide. I think this is last week. We'll mention it, but this is a really important guide. Mid-season might feel like you have a long way to go, like when you get to game 40 or 45, but your fantasy playoffs start before the end of the regular season. So we're not in mid-season yet. We are like 2/3 of the way, maybe we're like 2/3 of the way, maybe even 3/4, depending on your playoff setup anyway. What's going to help you get to the playoffs if you're not in them yet and succeed through is all the advice that you'll find in Dobber Hockey's 2017 midseason guide, on sale now at dobbersports.com/shop for $9.99.
Maybe, Brian, we could set up a hyperlink for that. So how about by the end of the show, we'll think of something, or we'll tweet it or something. Okay, check out that guide. Let's get into it. We have to talk about the guy who I started the show with. Andre Pavliak called up. And am I Nostro Elon Damit? That was horrible. But okay, like I said last week, we were talking about how bad Hellebuck and Hutchinson have been. And I said, I wonder if Winnipeg's going to call Pavliak up. And it's not like I saw anything. It just was a random thought that I spouted out on the podcast. It wasn't even in the doc that I was planning on saying that. Sure enough, like 2 days later, we get the news. Pavliak has been called up by Winnipeg. Since then, he's played both games, and not so bad. He had a 6-3 win versus Arizona, then a 5-3 win versus St. Louis. So that's obviously 3 goals against per game. That's not a great goals against average, but it's been on 70 shots. Like, he's taken a lot of shots. Winnipeg, obviously not the best defensive team. .914 save percentage at this point through 2 games for Andre Pavliak, which isn't great. But if he could put up those numbers, that's a lot better than Hellebuck, who has a .907 on the season, or Hutchinson an .894. And those numbers actually make them look good compared to what they've done over the past months. So those guys have been horrible. Pavliak has been okay. So moving forward, Brian, is Pavliak the #1 goalie on Winnipeg? And of course, does that make him a must-add in most leagues where he's available? Or do you think there's still going to be a chance that Hellebuck could steal the job? Obviously, Hutchinson, just forget about him, obviously. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on Pavliak at this point. I remember at the beginning of the year when he got sent down, you were talking about his Mercad per 60 numbers and saying maybe he's not as bad as we said he was. So all that said, Brian, floor is yours. I'm very, very curious to hear what you think about Andre Pavliak. I actually added him in 2 leagues, including my one against you. I wonder if you were like, damn, Elon got Pavliak when I wanted him, or if you were like, sucker, he's going to get blown up.
I don't think I thought either one of those things. Let's just zoom out for a minute before talking about Pavelec and see how we got here, where Winnipeg is recalling the goalie that they waived at the start of the season that they couldn't get rid of for anything of value, that they couldn't get rid of for anything and get something of value back in return. Winnipeg right now is 7th in the league in expected goals against per 60 minutes, which is good. That's a good thing. But they are 25th in actual goals against per 60 minutes, which is very bad. And, you know, I've been on the team most of the season about how the team has been having these systemic problems that haven't been properly addressed. And we know when Trouba was out to start the season, thought that might be having a really big impact on the goaltending Winnipeg, but he's back and things seem to be doing okay by those expected goals numbers. So what we're seeing in that gulf between the expected and the actual goals against is a letdown by the people who have been tending their net in Connor Hellebuyck and Michael Hutchinson. Hutchinson and Hellebuyck, they're both in the bottom 10 in the league this year in goals saved above average, posting negative numbers in the category, which means that the average NHL goalie this year would have stopped more pucks than they have. And so you look at Pavelec and you say, okay, he just needs to come in and be average. Now, that is something he's only managed to do save percentage-wise in 2 of his 7 years of NHL experience. So it's not as automatic as you might think for somebody with as much NHL experience as he has. But he has been a guy that we did talk about, as you mentioned, Elon, at the start of the season. He's got some backing amongst the goalie numbers community who see that he was facing shots that were harder than other places around the league, and that an average goalie might not have done so much better than he did in Winnipeg. And there was still some questions as to just how good he could possibly be if the team in front of him had it together. So maybe this is a chance to find out. So far, he has been average, which I think is a success. And then if we're looking long-term, we have to think, well, Connor Hellebuyck, you know, he's still a blue-chip prospect. He started his NHL career on that huge tear last season, lasted about 30 games before the wheels fell off. And I think there still should be opportunities for Hellebuyck to sneak in and steal starts. Pavelec has never been a rock-solid guy. I think he'll have a bad run or a bad couple starts here or there that will give the Jets an excuse to turn back to Hellebuyck and see what he's got. In the meantime, I don't know what you do with Hellebuyck. It's a tough thing. He's really of poor value at the moment with a 907 and not winning a lot of games. He's of even less value at a 907 and not even getting to play games. So I figure his value right now is comparable to guys like Vasilevsky and Fleury and even Michael Neuwirth. So that's what you're looking at if you own Connor Hellebuyck. If you don't own Ondrej Pavelec, I think it's a good time to go out and get him because he could go on a run. And who knows if the Jets are just happy to showcase him in advance of the deadline and maybe he goes to a team that's better than Winnipeg and gets some starts in there.
Oh, so that could be interesting. You grab Pavelec now. Maybe you get some bad starts in Winnipeg, but you might get some good starts on another team. That's an interesting way to look at it. Either way, yeah, like the thing with Ondrej Pavelec, I'll bet you anything he's going to blow up some people's stats some weeks. You really have to be careful when you start him because Winnipeg, as we've seen, just lets in a lot of goals, but they also let in a lot of shots. If your league count saves, there's value there. And I think they're going to run with Pavelec now, at least, like you say, Brian, until the trade deadline. Very interesting. And yeah, Hellebuyck, I don't know. We'll bring up some other goalies throughout the show and we'll see what you think about them in comparison to Hellebuyck, if maybe you have the option to drop Hellebuyck for one of those guys. Staying in Winnipeg, Drew Stafford got injured in yesterday's game versus St. Louis with a lower body injury, and normally maybe we wouldn't even talk about him because he hasn't been a fantasy relevant guy for most of the season, but just recently he's been doing really well. He has 6 points in his last 7 games, not including yesterday's game where he got injured, and of course the reason for that was because he took Patrick Laine's place on the Ehlers and Scheifele line, and we said, oh yeah, go and grab Stafford because he's on this great line, and we were right. He was great. If you picked him up and got him, fantastic. Hopefully you enjoyed that value, but no big deal now. He wasn't going to stay there anyways, even though he's injured. I don't want to make light of an injury. Hopefully he'll be okay. But it looks like Patrick Laine is going to be back soon from his concussion. He's been practicing with like full contact and all of that. So not really a fantasy impact here, I would think, because Stafford, no one else needs to take that spot on Laine's line because Laine is going to take it himself. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, Brian, before I get to one more thing about the Jets.
I'll just say it's too bad for Stafford. He was doing fairly well. He was on my watch list, and had he had a different schedule, he definitely would have ended up on my roster at some point this week. For the brief moments during the game that he was out, for the remainder part of the game in which he was injured, Andrew Kopp was his replacement on the Scheifele-Ehlers line. And like you said, Elon, Liney might be back anyway, so it doesn't matter. But if he isn't, if Liney and Stafford both miss another few games, I'm interested to see who ends up getting some top 6 time and if there's anything to be done with it. Still the situation to keep an eye on until Liney comes back.
Yeah, though I think at least with Stafford, like he's not an awesome player or anything, but he's a pretty decent player. He had 20 goals last year. So I thought he had value on that line because he's a decent player and now on an amazing line. I don't know if Andrew Kopp is someone I would grab, even though he's in the same situation. I don't think he's at the level of Drew Stafford. No offense to Andrew Kopp. I don't even know who he is.
No, if it does end up being Andrew Kopp, I feel like that was a very temporary fix. I don't think he would be the guy to fill in. If he is, you can probably keep your distance.
Okay, and since we're on Winnipeg, one last thing. Let's just take a look at what's going on near the top of their scoring leaders. You've got Scheifele, Wheeler, Ehlers, Little, all with at least 7 points in their last 8 games. Byfuglien with 6, Trouba with 4, so nothing new. Like all the guys you have on Winnipeg that you're expecting to give you points, you're getting points from. You can't be complaining, but I have actually left someone out of that group of players who have at least 7 points in their last 8 games from Winnipeg, and that is Matthew Perreault, old-timey, keeping Karlsson favorite. Matthew Perreault is back with fantasy hockey relevance. I'm very excited, Brian. Let's see if you'll be equally as excited as you were about him 2 years ago. Perreault has 7 points in his last 8 games played. That's 3 goals, 10 assists in his last 18 games played, which is pretty decent. 13 points in his last 18, 7 in his last 8. Yesterday, he was playing with Wheeler and Little at even strength and on the power play, getting decent power play time, playing with great players. Brian, that's what I like in a fantasy hockey pickup, not what you think I like in a fantasy hockey pickup, which we'll get to in a little bit. But if he stays in that spot, do you think people should be looking at Matthew Perreault as a potential add in their leagues? Winnipeg actually plays 3 of the 4 days next week before the All-Star break. Most of the teams play 2 times, but Winnipeg plays 3 times, so even for just a couple of days, you might want to take a look at Matthew Perreault.
I'll respond to your comment later when we have a longer conversation about what I think you like in a player. Matthew Perreault is someone you can add right now. You just don't want to be looking too long-term with him as a fix because Winnipeg does have that really weird, slow week that probably falls smack in the middle of your fantasy playoff. So that's something that you shouldn't really be thinking of right now. You can go for him. He actually played with Joel Armia and Brian Little for most of the last 3 games, but seems to be getting some looks with better lines, and I expect him to get a few more of those if Liney and Stafford are out for a couple games longer.
Okay, sorry. I kicked a thing. It's making noise. Okay. All right, so we'll start with Matthew Perreault, and then as we go through the show, I'll be asking you to compare people to him or, to the new guy at the top as we figure out who's the top free agent of the week in keeping Karlsson. This is something we should actually track. That would be fun. Oh, well, too bad we haven't been doing it. Let's move on to Pittsburgh. Last week, we talked about Chris Letang being injured again. He's week to week at this point. I really just don't want to get into that. This is ridiculous. My couple team, Brian, has 7 injuries right now, including both of my goalies. So not looking good, but hopefully most of them will be short-term. I hope Letang will be short-term, but I don't know if it will be at this point. But okay, we already talked about him to death, but that opened a spot for the Penguins to call up Jake Gensel, and he got called up to fill it. This isn't the first time he's been on the team. He was called up earlier in the year, and everyone went insane for him. And then, he had one good game and then sort of fell off and then ended up getting sent back down to the minors. But he's back again. He's got points in all 3 of his games so far, 1 goal and 2 assists, only 1 shot and goal total over those 3 games, but 15 hits. So maybe he's not giving you shots, but he's giving you hits along with these points. And of course, the reason why he's getting these points is because he's a good player, I guess, but mainly because he's playing with Patrick Hornqvist and Evgeny Malkin, and he's getting a little bit of power play time, but not much. But mainly, obviously, if you're on line 2 with Malkin and Hornqvist, you're going to get some points because Malkin is not slowing down. Hornqvist keeps teasing us that he might actually be slowing down, but then he's like, no, I'm just kidding, guys. I'm going to score a goal for you, make you feel better. So I won't talk about Hornqvist. Let's just talk about Jake Gensel at this point. A lot of people rush to grab him in all of the leagues that I'm in. So my main questions to you, Brian, are 1, can we even expect him to stay with the big club for the rest of the season? Like, should people be, trading for him, expecting that he'll be able to help them for the long term? And also, I guess, regardless, like, will he stay in the top 6 if he does stay? And also, even forgetting about that, whether he'll be a long-term or short-term guy, do you like him right now? Do you think that he would be a good free agent pickup for people if he's still available?
Before I answer that, I'm going to go back to Chris Letang just to point out that actually Dauber tweeted this recently, earlier today, this afternoon. Just to point out, actually Dauber tweeted this earlier this afternoon. Justin Schultz leads all defensemen in scoring since November 27th. He has 28 points in 24 games, so averaging more than a point per game. And you might think, okay, 1 million power play points, just 8 of them on the power play, which is like the low end of the other guys in the top 7 or 9. on that list in the same time span. He's ahead of Brent Burns, who comes next, Victor Hedman, Erik Karlsson, Torrey Krug, Justin Schultz. What a guy to have on your roster. My eternal apologies for not recommending you grab him, but I'm sure glad I did when I still had the chance. Okay.
You son of a bitch, Brian.
That's so rude. Are you going to bleep that?
I'll just probably cut it out. That's just for the chat room.
Okay. But to the guy you wanted to talk about, Jake Guentzel, back up with the big team. He was lighting up the AHL after his last call down. Now he's got 21 goals and 21 assists for 42 points in 33 games with the Baby Penguins. And so far in this cup of coffee, has a goal on his only shot, which is not the greatest indication. You know, it is nice that he's on such a great line, but I'm curious to see if this call-up follows the story of his last one. He started on a top line, has a big game or two, and then nothing before being moved out of the top six and then sent back down. I like Jake Guentzel, and I think he couldn't be a full-time NHLer within the next however long. You know, as soon as there's a spot for him in Pittsburgh, I feel like he can take it. But in the short term, you're looking at Matt Cullen likely returning in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And with the All-Star break, you might only get somewhere between 5 and 8 more games out of Guentzel before the Pens make that decision of whether to send him back down or to keep him up with a healthy Matt Cullen. Also, these weeks coming up, Elon, are so jam-packed. You're going to have a lot of sit or start roster decisions to be made with a lot of teams trying to fit in games leading into the All-Star break and coming out of it.
Is that it?
Yeah, now you're supposed to ask me who I want more.
But did you say like what you expect from Guentzel while he's there? Oh, whatever. Okay.
Well,
what was your takeaway again? Just so I can like respond to it.
Well, why don't you just ask me that for the show and then I'll answer it.
Okay. All right, yeah, so definitely there's the risk that he'll get sent down, but I'm not sure I caught it, Brian. While he's up there playing with Malkin and Hornqvist, is he someone to add? Like, what do you expect he could put up? Like, he has a point per game since he's been called up. I assume he can't keep that up, but what do you think? Like 1 point every 2 games is reasonable and maybe a little bit more?
That would be nice. I mean, I did mention that last time he was called up, he started strong and then faded out. And I don't know if this is going to be the same thing, because last time he was called up, if I recall right, he had a bunch of shots right off the bat, and now he has just 1 shot over 3 games, which is not something I love to see. But as long as he's up there and playing with those guys, I mean, he's in a really great position to get points.
Yeah, that's true. But so is Matthew Perreault. So let's get our first this or that question to you, which I know you love. Guentzel or Perreault, if they're both available to you right now in free agency?
I think Guentzel is, if you're going for the jackpot, the home run swing, but Matthew Perreault is the steadier guy. And again, like if this is a depth guy that you're adding to your roster, and I'm just going to say this once more for the whole episode, but the schedule is so crowded that if this is the bottom guy, it's not really a huge decision that you need to make. Anyway, between the two, I would probably go with Guentzel just because of how exciting it's been to see young players on the Penguins do well. Case in point, Connor Sheary has been amazing. And I just want to touch on him while we're talking about young Penguins. If you haven't been keeping track of him, 31 points in 38 games, and shrink that sample and just go back to the last 23 games. He has 11 goals and 11 assists for 22 points in that time with 64 shots, so almost 3 per game. And of those 22 points in 23 games, only 2 of them coming with the man advantage. So he is working hard and paying his dues and scoring points at even strength. He's doing so well for a guy who really was on waiver wires. I still feel like he was available in a lot of leagues as recently as a month ago.
Yeah, I remember I picked him up for a spot start in the cupful. Obviously, I should have held on, a month or 2 months ago, whenever it was. I dropped him, someone else picked him up, and that person definitely hit the jackpot. And the frustrating thing is I knew he was going to play with Crosby. I remember even earlier in the season when I was saying, yeah, it looks like Connor Sheary's going to stay on this line. I think you were a bit more skeptical, but clearly he has. There's no way he's getting bumped off that line. They're really clicking. I would be very surprised. Back to Guentzel versus Matthew Perreault. Brian, I'm going to disagree with you. Unless your league counts hits and you're going to benefit from Guentzel's hits, give me Matthew Perreault. I mean, he's playing with Wheeler. Maybe not as good as Malkin, but not too bad. Plus, I like the shots on goal. That's another thing, Brian, I like when looking at players to pick up in free agency. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I like players who take shots, and Perreault has 4, 3, 3, like in his last 3 games. Guentzel, the 1 shot, really doesn't help me again, if your league counts hits, then you're getting help from him. But otherwise, I don't know if I want to rely just on the points. Okay, let's go now.
Wait, no, let me respond, because you're saying I'm dumb for taking Gensel, or that I was so wrong about assuming that you would.
No.
I definitely lean more towards Perot. If your league counts shots and doesn't count hits, there's good reason for you to go. There's good reason for you to go There's good reason for you to choose Perot for the steady hand. But Elon, I keep saying like this spot. I don't know how to say it in a different way than I've already said it 10 times. I feel like this is a spot I want to use just to see if a guy explodes, and I want to have dibs on him. If that's the case, I see a lot more upside with Gensel. So I'm actually picking the more exciting player while you're going conservative. I think you're just doing this to throw me off your scent.
Okay, well, you've built like an interesting scenario here. Like you're saying this is a roster spot that's going to, sure, yeah. If you want the guy with the highest upside, maybe it's Gensel on that amazing line. But, long-term success, it depends. Like not everyone, Brian, is just going to be, cycling that spot throughout. Maybe some people are looking at someone they want to add that they're going to be able to depend on for a while. So yeah, obviously it depends. Obviously we've given you pros and cons for each. Make your decision. Tweet at us at Keep It Karlsson. Let us know if you actually end up deciding between Gensel and Perot. There's going to be other players we're going to be talking about. So maybe we're going to be forgetting about both of them compared to other guys. Anyways, I don't know if I mentioned, Brian, we're kind of on a rosters section of the podcast right now. Just like sort of different interesting roster moves, like Pavlik being called up, Gensel being called up. Next, actually, this isn't really even a roster news. This is just sort of general news. Jack Capuano was fired by the New York Islanders last week. Doug Weight is the new coach. And you know what? The Islanders have won 3 games in a row. So is that a coincidence? I don't know. And actually, the Islanders are playing today. So let's see how they're doing. They're tied with Philly. Oh, normally that would be not that bad. But against Philly, like you should be winning like 8-2 at this point. So I'm surprised that they're only tied right now. But we'll see how that game shakes out. But yeah, is there any fantasy impact here? Like the first thing I was thinking when I saw the Islanders were going to get a new coach was I was wondering, is that going to change who's playing with Tavares? Because that's really all that matters in fantasy, right? Like who's going to be the defenseman on the top power play? Still Nick Leddy. Who are the 2 guys playing with John Tavares on the power play and at even strength? We've got Anders Lee, Josh Bailey. Kind of nothing has changed. So I feel like there's not really any fantasy impact to the new coach. Maybe you could let me know if you disagree. But of course, John Tavares still surging, still doing great, and that has led to still Bailey and Lee doing great. Anders Lee has a 4-game point streak, 2 goals and 7 shots on goal yesterday. Josh Bailey up to 30 points in 44 games. These are both guys kind of like Connor Sheary that you always see in free agency, but they keep doing well. So if they're still in free agency for you, you might want to start wondering if you should be picking them up and not just assuming they're always going to be there for you. But yeah, John Tavares finally has been doing well. And yeah, I guess that was my question to you, Brian. What do you think is the fantasy impact of this new coach, if any?
I think you'd have to look pretty hard beyond the current setup to find any possibility that there is room for somebody else to be fantasy relevant on that team. My immediate thought is to look at 2 guys who have been maligned recently under Capuano. So the first is Ryan Strome. His time on ice was already on the rise before the firing, but in his last 6 games, he's had a time on ice total that's good to be in his top 10 time on ice totals this year. And in his last game with the new coach, Doug Weight, he saw a season high 18 minutes and 44 seconds. But the caveat is that this is still Ryan Strome, who has shown us little to nothing. Not only as his minutes have increased, he's now pointless in 8 straight, but who has also shown us little to nothing for the last year plus. I'm also interested to see what this means for Andrew Ladd when he returns as well. Garth Snow acquired him, and I imagine he'd like his coach to try and make that acquisition look better than it has to date. But again, this is Andrew Ladd. He's been on decline for over a year now. This is also the Islanders, where fantasy relevance more or less begins and ends with the Tavares line now that Nielsen is off elsewhere. I don't think the Isles are suddenly a better team. They're not going to start scoring a whole lot more than they have. So I'm not really expecting much extra added. So I'm not really expecting any added relevance from guys who are not playing with John Tavares.
Yeah, I agree, though maybe the one player I haven't mentioned yet that could get some improvement, at least if the team is actually better, which I guess you kind of hope they would be. Why did they fire the coach? If not because they think a new coach could do something better. And hey, this 3-game win streak, but obviously that's a super small sample size. Let's not get into that. But we do have to mention Thomas Greiss. He's riding 2 straight shutouts at this point. And I guess that was before today. So obviously that is no longer the case because the score is 2-2 against Philly. But still, Thomas Greiss has been really great lately. He's up to a .927 save percentage on the season before today. Great to see him taking advantage of his first starting gig in the NHL. Like, he's been around forever. We've always thought that he was a great goalie and someone who you'd want to pick up for a spot start whenever he'd be playing. He's the starter now, and he's really doing well. Brian, is there like any chance that the Islanders are a good team now? Like, they've been a bad team all year. Like, going into the season, we thought, oh yeah, the Islanders, they're a good team. Then quickly we realized, no, they're not good. They're bad. And so then you would assume then their goalie isn't of so much value to you. But Thomas Greiss, he's doing well. Ryan in our Keeping Karlsson patron only Facebook group asked about dropping Bishop for Greiss yesterday. And, that's the type of question that going into the season, you think, oh my God, that's crazy. Like Ben Bishop, he was a Vezina finalist last year. But, Bishop got pulled after letting in 5 goals in 2 periods versus Arizona yesterday. And he was asking about now dropping Bishop for Greiss. He only has 2 goalie spots. He's only allowed to have 2 goalies. I kind of feel like you make that move because Islanders should at least be as good of a team as Tampa Bay at this point. Like, Tampa Bay is a train wreck themselves. And also, Greiss is like a really good goalie. He just never had the chance to prove himself. Now that he has, like last year and this year, he's been fantastic.
I don't think the Isles should be as good as the Lightning, even though they have been better to date. They're the only team below the Lightning in the Eastern Conference standings, but they have 4 games in hand, and the gap is only 1 point. And maybe by the end of this episode, Elon, by the end of this Philly game, they'll actually be ahead of Tampa with 3 games in hand. So I don't know what that says more about the Islanders or Tampa. If you're trying to choose between Bishop and Greiss, I think what we know about Greiss is that he's better than Yaroslav Halak, which is, a start, which is not saying a whole lot because of how Halak played in his time before getting demoted to the AHL. If I was choosing between the two, I would still pick Bishop. I still think that Tampa should be the better team, and so they'll be better. The Isles are actually really poor defensively. They are 29th in the league in expected goals against and 26th in the league in score-adjusted Corsi, which is share of shot attempts. So I think they have some serious defensive problems, and Greiss is really going to have to keep performing very well to still be putting up good numbers and collecting wins.
Yeah, so definitely it'll be fun when we do our next Schmore Goalies Board goalie rankings. Greiss is obviously going to shoot way up the list because there's no Halak to contend with. I wonder how high he'll end up, but that's maybe a teaser for a future episode either next year or maybe something mid-season. No, we'll see if we can get to that. Brian, before we move on, let's mention our sponsor for this week's episode of Keeping Karlsson, SeatGeek. SeatGeek, that is like a really great site to go and find tickets to all your sporting events and concerts and events. As you all know, there's nothing like being behind the glass for a fun hockey game. I don't know. I didn't have anything planned here for a fun hockey game. Sure, you could go to a bar, or you could watch it at home, but you're not there with the action and the banging and the smashing. Like, that's what hockey's all about, playing the 90s music as you're enjoying the game, drinking your $20 Coke. So,
wow, you're really selling the hockey game experience, Elon, but if you want to go to the game and you want to get that $20 Coke, you can do it with a rebate that SeatGeek is offering Keeping Karlsson listeners if they buy tickets through SeatGeek for the first time. Tell the people about it, Elon.
I had more to say about SeatGeek also, Brian. I was just getting to it. I was going to say, by the way, before I want to leave people in suspense about this amazing deal from SeatGeek that you could get as a listener of Keeping Karlsson. But did you know, Brian, that my wife wants to go to see Cour de Pirat, who's coming to Toronto, a fun indie Canadian like French singer, and we looked and the tickets were sold out and it was, oh no, we're not gonna be able to get tickets. But we found tickets available on SeatGeek, and that includes their ranking of the value of the ticket. They're also backed by their 100% guarantee. We don't really mention that, but that means if you buy the ticket and it turns out to be a scam, they'll get you back, but it probably won't be a scam. SeatGeek is great. We've both used it. We've had great experiences, and we both got our $20 rebate from our first SeatGeek purchase because we bought our tickets from SeatGeek. So if you want to get that $20 rebate, go to the website or download the SeatGeek app, enter the promo code KEEPING, and you're going to get that $20 US rebate check after your first purchase. So check it out, SeatGeek, be a geek, get a seat for deals on fleek. It's a good place to go.
And thus ends the most disjointed SeatGeek spot we've ever offered. But it's a great service. It's way better than all those other guys. Promise.
Hey, SeatGeek, why don't you tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson? Let us know if you're actually listening to these. I hope you like it.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
I'm curious if they're listening. Does it matter what we say?
Well, they check in. They want to know that we're doing it. I feel like Okay.
I'm just curious. If you're listening, SeatGeek, let us know what you think. We're open to feedback. Anyways, okay. Next, let's go on to injuries, which is going to basically be a segment about all the people injured on my Cupful team. Let's start with John Gibson, who got hurt yesterday versus Minnesota, an upper body injury. I saw that it might not be serious. So who knows? With these goalie injuries, Brian, you're the one calming me down earlier today and saying, Elon, you have to wait at least a day to get more news. So maybe Gibson will be back soon. We know Tuukka Rask had that scare a couple of weeks ago, and he ended up being fine, though he again left today's game. Who knows now if he'll be fine? That's both of my Cupful goalies, by the way, injured right now, Rask and Gibson. Anyways, I wanted to talk about Gibson because he's been on such a great run. He's actually been a 927. He's actually been a 929 save percentage goalie over the past 60 days, up to 921 on the season after a rough start. 921 is an above average goalie, and he's somehow pulling that off, even though he was not that great to start the season. When Gibson left the last game, Jonathan Bernier came in and promptly got blown up. 4 goals against on 20 shots. He's down to an 899 save percentage on the season. He's fallen below 900. Jonathan Bernier, just brutal. If Gibson were to be out long-term, and maybe he won't be, but I'm kind of curious to get your sense anyways, would it be smart for people to even add Jonathan Bernier? Like, my first thought was, oh no, I've already used all my ads for the week in the Cupful. I can't even pick up Bernier if I want him. But then as I saw him letting in goal after goal, I thought, you know what, I don't think I would really want him anyways. And also, if you recall, Anaheim picked up Jonas Enroth recently. They got him in a trade from Toronto. If Gibson is out long-term or misses any games, is there value in Jonathan Bernier? Or do you think that Jonas Enroth gets a chance to take the job since Bernier has just been so bad? Though, to be fair, Enroth also has been having a horrible season. He has an 872 save percentage in 6 games played. I'd imagine he's better than that, though. He had a 922 save percentage last season on LA.
It's funny with how good Gibson has been, how there is another way to connect him and Freddie Anderson in terms of their narrative since being in Anaheim together and now being apart. It's they've each had a good run now, followed by a really tough start, and I wonder how much longer they'll sort of follow the same path. As for Bernier, I don't think he's a very safe choice as a backup goalie. You might want to try and bank on him getting a lot of starts if you think Randy Carlyle is going to favor him with the Leafs connection, but maybe Carlyle also has some empathy for Enroth as another guy who failed with Toronto and was then cut loose. I would prefer Enroth to Bernier if I was coaching the team. And so I wouldn't actually make a move for any of these guys until I start to see that Enroth is getting starts. He's a guy I'm willing to take a risk on. Bernier, I think, is just going to wreck your numbers often. If the Ducks win, it'll be in spite of him.
Wow, okay. So you've heard it here first. Brian likes Enroth more than Bernier. Maybe you shouldn't have said you like either of them because maybe they're both not that good. But I agree, like Enroth has been good for a while. Bernier was really bad last year except for a short run. I guess like Bernier is really the type of goalie that needs to get on a roll. Like he was doing well at the beginning of the season. I remember he had that horrible game where he let in like 8 goals against Calgary and Gibson couldn't come in to relieve him because he was having stomach issues. And then after that, it's just never been the same. And before that, Bernier was looking like a really solid backup. And people were saying in our Facebook group that they thought that Bernier was going to end up splitting starts or maybe even getting more starts than Gibson as the season went on. Clearly that hasn't happened, both because of Gibson's great play and Bernier's bad play. It will be interesting. Hopefully Gibson will just come back and be fine, and this whole segment will have been for naught, but not completely for naught because we're on Anaheim, so we might as well mention a couple of other people like Rickard Rakell. Brian, 5 points in his last 6 games with Getzlaf back, and that's exactly what we said last week. We said he'd been on that cold streak, but it was because Getzlaf was injured and Rakell was playing with bad players. Clearly, Rakell needs to be with good players to produce at this point in his career, it seems, and now that he's back playing with Getzlaf and Perry and on the top power play, great for Rickard Rakell. Also, I guess there is another injury. Jacob Silverberg has an upper body injury, just day-to-day. Maybe he'll be back soon. I saw Logan Shaw took his place on line 2 with Kessler and Cogliano. No points to show for it, just around 10 to 12 minutes of ice time. I assume that people shouldn't be rushing to grab Logan Shaw. Is he similar to Andrew Kopp in terms of someone who no one has heard of that's on a good line, but you shouldn't expect any fantasy output from them?
Yeah, well, and still very briefly on a good line. So we'll see if that sticks for a couple games, and then it's time to really think about it. Silverberg could be back before long, though. Rickard Rakell, I don't know what's more to say. Elon, we've had our back and forth about him, and I'm looking forward to keeping that conversation going for another 2.5 months, but I don't feel like we need to get into depth about it this week. Ryan Kessler is a Duck I'd like to talk about. He's having himself another year, or half year, I suppose. 18 goals, 21 assists for 39 points in 49 games with 118 shots on goal. The difference, once again this year, is the huge power play success he's seeing. He has 17 power play points already. He had 15 power play points last year. there was a question when Boudreau left, and he flourished under Boudreau. So you wonder, was he going to continue having the offensive success that we saw him have under Boudreau, especially in the latter half of last year? And the answer so far has been yes. He's working for Randy Carlyle too, and for his fantasy owners.
Yeah, I still remember the days when we would say, don't worry about Kessler unless you're in a league that counts face-off wins or hits. But clearly he gives you points and those other things. We see people on our Facebook group or tweeting at us saying how Kessler's like a top 10 guy in their league because of all these things being counted. So yeah, fantastic season. Definitely if you drafted Kessler, you made a smart decision, and maybe Brian and I wouldn't have done that. Brian, he's very convincing. He has convinced me for a long time that Kessler's no big deal, but obviously something is clicking over in Anaheim. Okay, let's go to another goalie injury. Semyon Varlamov is going to be shut down until at least after the All-Star game with another groin injury. And I guess not another groin injury, the same groin injury that keeps on taking him out. So again, it's Calvin Pickard time. He actually had a good game on Thursday versus Anaheim. 2 goals against on 36 shots. Unfortunately, he still lost 2-1. He also played well in his previous start on January 6th versus the Islanders, where he helped Colorado get a 2-1 win, only 1 goal against on 36 shots. Overall, Pickard has been bad, and we were excited about him earlier in the year when Varlamov went down, because we've seen before in previous seasons that Pickard really benefited from Varlamov missing time, and he would always do really well. But overall this season, only a .904 save percentage, and Colorado's clearly a very bad team. I'd be curious to know if you think Pickard is worth an ad right now. Is he riskier or less risky than a guy like Jonathan Bernier if Gibson was to stay out?
Pickard is probably about as risky. I think it's a wash between him and Bernier. I guess Bernier has the better team, and I don't think Pickard's play sustains. Like, he's not going to be able to steal wins on a regular basis. So again, I think if Anaheim wins, they'll win in spite of Bernier, while Colorado just needs to win in spite of their entire team. So I like Bernier's odds of picking up a W a little better, and I don't expect great numbers from either of them.
So obviously this is just speculation. Brian, I think I'll disagree. I think that Pickard is a better goalie than Bernier. I don't know. I just remember seeing so much success from Pickard in the past on like also a not great Colorado team. So I think I would take Pickard of the two of them. But it could probably go either way, and you could also just get burned either way if you went with either of them.
Sure, put them together on the same team. Who do I want in net? I would probably choose Pickard, but taking into account the teams they play for, that tips the scale. I feel like I really want to make my points when we disagree this week.
Yeah, people know that you're going to be right and I'm going to be wrong. That's how it always goes, right? So you don't have to worry about it too much. Anything to Spencer Martin, by the way? He got the start yesterday versus San Jose, even though it wasn't a back-to-back. So I'm not sure why, but he's the guy who got called up. Obviously, since Varlamov is injured, he ended up letting in 3 goals on 30 shots. Took the overtime loss. I don't know. Is there anything to him?
Okay. Not a whole lot. Like, I guess the answer is why not try him out? If Pickard's not working and Varlamov might be out longer, why not give this guy a shot? 3rd round pick, 63rd overall back in 2010. He's 21 years old. That can't be right. Oh, 2013. 3rd round pick, 63rd overall in the 2013 NHL entry draft. He's a 21-year-old and has posted a .917 save percentage in 45 games for the San Antonio Rampage of the AHL. He also played in the East Coast League for half the year last year. I don't see any reason to think he'll be a better option than Pickard, so I don't think he's anyone you need to go ahead and grab. And like, even if Varlamov is healthy, do you want Semyon Varlamov on your team?
Yeah, Colorado's been bad. Varlamov is injury prone and blows up himself. Yeah, just a bit of a dumpster fire over in Colorado, and it might get worse if this Tyson Barrie injury is serious, which it might not be. He's only day-to-day right now with the lower body injury, but it's like too bad. He's been one of the bright spots there, one of the few bright spots. He actually has 1 goal, 9 assists for 10 points in his last 10 games. So Barrie finally doing well, as we've discussed. But I guess if Barry's out, also Eric Johnson is out. So Beauchemin was seeing a lot of power play time in the last game. He actually scored a goal. So I don't know. We already know him as a guy who gives you blocks. So in the short term, if Beauchemin's available, I think he's a good guy to add, especially if your league counts blocks. Brian, do you want just me to keep going?
Yeah, there's another defenseman in a similar. Is he next?
John Karlsson?
Oh no, Niskanen. Okay. Yeah, Karlsson Niskanen. Okay. Yep, keep going.
And another defenseman, just like Tyson Barrie, who was not so great to start the season, but has been doing well lately, but is now injured. Let's talk about John Karlsson, injured again with a lower body injury over in Washington. I still remember last year when he went day to day, but it ended up being day to day forever. So hopefully John Karlsson is okay. You know, they said at first that he was maybe only going to miss 1 game. Then it was 2 games. Now I think it's been 3 games. He has an O status on Yahoo instead of a day to day, which is not looking good. I don't know how they come up with that. Anyways, unsurprisingly, Matt Niskanen has 2 goals and 5 assists in his last 4 games. Maybe unsurprisingly isn't the right word because I guess that is more points than you would expect. But of course, he's producing now that he takes the job as a top power play defenseman, as he always does when Karlsson goes down. He actually had 3 assists versus Dallas yesterday. 3 of these 7 points in his last 4 games have been on the power play. I obviously will say you have to add Matt Niskanen if you can, if he's available. I'm sure he's not because he's been doing okay even with Karlsson in the lineup, but so much better even with Karlsson out of the lineup. And like I said, who knows how long Karlsson will be out. And since we're on Washington, Brian, they're scoring so many goals.
Is that all you have to say about it?
Yeah, because then I realized I might as well get you to talk about Niskanen before I talk about the goalies. Oh, no, okay, so fine. They're scoring so many. Okay, so I'll talk about Burakovsky. There's so many goals. And, you know, the usual suspects are getting the points. You know, the Ovechkins and the Backstrom. Kuznetsov is even doing well like we hoped he would at the start of the year. But one guy who maybe you wouldn't have expected, Andrei Burakovsky, is actually even on a nice run. He has 4 goals and 3 assists in his last 5 games played. Surprisingly, he's doing this from a line with Lars Eller and Brett Connolly. So I don't know how Burakovsky is getting all of these points, except that obviously Washington's scoring a lot and they're spreading it around. So, okay, I've said a lot now about the Capitals. Why don't you just comment on your thoughts on Niskanen or Burakovsky if you have any?
Well, Niskanen, like you said, is doing what he always does, which is when Karlsson's out, he steps up onto that top power play unit and takes more even strength minutes and does a very good job with them. He's proven himself to be almost, you might say, like a Justin Schultz in Washington as someone who can handle that role, and a Francois Beauchemin as well. If you're choosing between the two, Elon, I'm surprised you didn't ask me. Beauchemin, of course, is going to get you more blocks, so you might prefer him unless you're in a plus-minus situation, in which case you might prefer Niskanen. Also, it made me wonder when Erik Johnson is coming back. His timetable for return was extended. It was supposed to be 6 to 8 weeks. Now it's 8 to 10, and it looks like he might start skating in about 1 week's time by now, hopefully returning in February. Okay, back to the Caps. Yeah, Washington's been ridiculous lately. The goals do not stop coming, and Burakovsky is one of the guys who is bringing those goals onto the score sheet. 4 goals, 3 assists, 7 points in his last 10 games. 4 goals, 3 assists, 7 points in his last 5 games with 10 shots on goal. He had nice runs last year with Kuznetsov, and we were all watching him then. He was a big part of my Cupful roster into the playoffs, but his scoring dried up when Kuznetsov's did. So it's refreshing to see Burakovsky doing this away from Kuznetsov a little more on his own. That said, it doesn't mean it's sustainable to me. He saw less than 10 minutes of ice in the most recent game against Dallas, and his normal time on ice is usually in the 12 to 14 minute range with a very small power play role. He's a guy who can go on runs, but he hasn't made himself out to be anything more than a half point per game guy. I don't think this is the year he breaks out. I think he's going to need to be inside the top 6 rather than outside the top 6 to be able to break out, and that situation doesn't seem to be on the horizon.
Yeah, last year it was Marcus Johansson who was in the bottom 6, but at least he was getting like top power play time. This year, Johansson is in the top 6. Most recently playing with Kuznetsov and Williams. And like I said, Burakovsky is down with Connolly and Eller. So I agree. If you picked up Burakovsky and you've been riding this hot run, that's fantastic. If you could sell high, I think definitely try to do that. Otherwise, hold him for a bit until he slows down, and then you could drop him for the next hot guy. I assume you wouldn't take Gensel. Assume you wouldn't take Burakovsky over Gensel or Perreault at this point?
No, because he's still not playing in that top 6. Both those other guys are, so I would prefer them, even with all this scoring. Like, Washington can't possibly keep scoring 4, 5, or more goals per game the rest of the season, right?
I wouldn't think so, but I mean, if any team could do it, it's them. But obviously, even the Washington Capitals are going to have to slow down at some point. But we should also mention they've got 3 back-to-backs over the next 2 weeks. And for a lot of people, these next 2 weeks are one matchup because of the All-Star game splitting them up. So with Washington having literally 3 back-to-backs in that 2-week span, potentially in one matchup, you might want to take a look at, oh man, what's Grubauer's first name?
Philip?
Philip? Oh, I want to take a look at Philip Grubauer as a goalie, as a generally spot start backup goalie that's going to give you a lot of games, you would think, because, you know, Washington has, well, games. Because Washington hasn't been the type of team to be playing Holtby even through these back-to-backs. They've been giving Grubauer a lot of time. I think they saw last year how Holtby maybe played too much and maybe sort of tired out come playoff time. Grubauer's been great this year. He has a .925 save percentage on the season. He wins most of the games he plays just because of his team. So I would definitely take a look at him as someone to add for your next matchup if he's available. Okay, next.
You keep banging that thing, huh?
Like while I'm talking?
No.
Oh, good. It's my feet, you know. I don't know. I gotta move around. All right.
But okay.
Oh, you mean but okay is the thing I keep doing?
No.
All right. So good. But okay. Let's move now to Florida. We're still on injuries and nothing new, but we got some news that Barkov may be out for the rest of the season. And we got some news that Huberdeau might also not play, though then I saw that maybe he actually still will come back in March. But anyways, really bad for Barkov, who we thought maybe would be out a month or two. Maybe we said to even buy low at this point and get him for your fantasy hockey playoffs. But if you did that, you might be in trouble because it's looking like he might not come back. Obviously, this is great news for Vincent Trocheck, who gets to hold his top line center spot. Trocheck is scorching right now. He has 6 goals and 4 assists in his last 7 games played. Is this at all possibly sustainable for Vincent Trocheck? Like, not over a point per game, but can he be a really solid, like 65-point pace fantasy contributor in this role? Yesterday, he was on a line with Riley Smith and Jonathan Marchessault. Previously, he was also playing with Jaromir Jagr and Seth Griffith. And actually, Seth Griffith isn't even on Florida anymore. He got waived and Toronto picked him up, but we won't talk about him. Yeah, I'm just curious to get your thoughts on Vincent Trocheck and also maybe if there's anyone else benefiting from these 2 injuries. Like Jonathan Marchessault, people in our Facebook group were very excited. They were saying, yes, for Trocheck, yes, for Marchessault. And I'm like, yeah, I agree about Trocheck. That's great. But Marchessault, he's been in the top 6 all season. And aside from that amazing hot run, he's basically been a 0.5 point per game guy over the last couple of months, so that's fine. But I feel like if he didn't have this hot start, people wouldn't be so excited about him. He's actually on a nice run right now. He has 3 points in his last 4 games, and he's like a decent guy. I think he is fantasy relevant, but I don't know if you should be so excited as if like now, you know, he's amazing just because he's going to stay in the top 6 because he's been there all year. And like I say, he hasn't been great. But Trocheck, wow. Tell me if I'm wrong about either of these guys.
Oh, I gladly will. The weird thing about all this, though, like even before I talk about those specific guys, I'm not sure if the news that Barkov and Huberdeau are going to be out longer than we expected, I don't know if that's good or bad for the rest of the Panthers players and their production. You know, on one hand, now they get to be the guys who take on the top roles and get the best scoring opportunities. But on the other hand, they don't have a ton of help to make things happen. It's a thinner roster that they're playing on. So Vincent Trocheck is the obvious guy who gets to be first-line center now. And I think he could be a legitimate 55, 60-point threat. I think 65 is high, Elon, especially considering that's what we were talking about for Barkov coming into the season. But we'll see what Trocheck can put together while centering pretty much the only line that looks at all dangerous offensively right now. So you'll have opponents keying in hard on him in a way that, well, I guess they have been for the duration of Barkov's injury. So he's somewhat used to it. It also happened last season. But still, it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out over another potentially 30 games or so. And then you look down the rest of the lineup, you see guys like Jussi Jokinen, Riley Smith, and even Jaromir Jagr, although he's actually been successful this year. So I'm going to leave him out for the most part. But Jokinen and Smith, they look snake-bitten this season. I don't think they deserve to have their point totals as low as they are. So I'd keep an eye on them as the team is going to be forced to look to them for secondary scoring or even primary scoring, particularly Riley Smith and hopefully Jussi Jokinen, who is hopefully not too old to be producing. Jagr is somehow not too old to be producing, so why not Jokinen? It's interesting that Jagr has actually already stepped into a bigger role all year long. I think that's because Huberdeau was out. His shot and shot attempt numbers bounced back up after dropping last year to a point where you might have said, Yager's getting too old. He can't be the guy who fires pucks on net the way he used to. But he's back up there with his shot and shot attempt rates again this year. And he's going to be relied on more. And he's another guy whose shooting percentage and on-ice shooting percentage feel like they have some room to grow. So now's the time. Now's the time for these guys to step into the spotlight and fight off the terrible percentages, or however you want to put it, all the bad variants they've been seeing, and fight their way to regress back to the mean. One other name that I want to point out, Colton Sevier, who used to be on Dallas and got a couple good looks there and did okay. He's had more time with Florida, and I think he does his job well. Not scoring at all, but is good for shots on goal if you're just looking for those. And Nick Bjugstad, I want to see what he offers when he's back, now that he is essentially going to be guaranteed a top 6 spot. It's going to be a really interesting couple months. Lots of opportunity in Florida, but not a lot of depth to work with.
Yeah, definitely check out your free agency. See which Florida Panthers top 6 players are there. I've seen Riley Smith available in a lot of my leagues, and he has short little runs, and he also takes a lot of shots. So yeah, some interesting guys there. We'll have to see. I'm just saying, don't go crazy over Jonathan Marchessault. I know everyone calls me a buzzkill in the Facebook groups. Now I feel like I have to bang the drum that Marchessault isn't as good as people think, but I actually have him in one of my leagues, so I'll be happy to be wrong about that. I'm going to take a break from our regularly scheduled injury talk to say breaking news, breaking Keeping Karlsson news. Steve Mason has won a game. Philadelphia won, and Steve Mason was the goalie, and he had a good game. Like, he made 36 saves on 38 shots. So we weren't planning to talk about Philly this week, but I just have to mention Steve Mason alert. He's not overly terrible, or at least wasn't today. So good to know. Thomas Greiss, by the way, also had a good game, even though they lost. But anyways, just wanted to say, let's get back to injuries.
I mean, I was going to say it's not that huge a deal. It's his second win in 4 games. Although before that, he had lost 6 in a row, and then he won, and then he lost 2 before that. And then you get into that crazy run he had where he won like 8 in a row, even with some really questionable goaltending performances. Rough year for Steve Mason and people who really claim that Steve Mason is a good goalie.
Like some people that we won't mention. But now it's all forgotten, right? He won a game. It's only going to be blue skies ahead, I assume, for sure, right? Brian, are you regretting you had him? He got dropped in your Cupful Tier 1 division. Someone dropped Steve Mason. I was so surprised you didn't even make a bid on him. You held on to the Dallas tandem.
If they're both going to blow up my numbers, I might as well go with the guys who are likely to get me the win.
Just like winner Steve Mason today. So we'll see how he turns out. I'm happy for him. And as someone who has him in 2 leagues, I hope that this is the start of something. Okay, one more injury to discuss. Thomas Vanek got injured today. So this is an up-to-the-minute news podcast, of course, which obviously isn't that useful for people who aren't in the chat room, because for you guys that are listening tomorrow, it's already not up to the minute. But we're doing our best here. Vanek, injured. He was playing on a line with Nielsen and Athanasiou, and Abdelkader took his place. So if you like that spot with Nielsen and Athanasiou, maybe you look at Abdelkader moving forward. Though we've seen Abdelkader on better lines over the past few years. Like, he's played with guys like Zetterberg and Datsuk and never really did anything except for a couple of little runs. I don't even want to talk about Justin Abdelkader. I want to talk about Thomas Vanek. He has 16 points in his last 16 games and 31 points on 36 in the season. He's quietly been having an amazing season. That's like a 70-point pace. So that's fantastic. Great bounce back here for him. Of course, I'm talking about him because he got injured, so hopefully it won't be a long-term thing. I think I saw that they think it's just like a day-to-day situation. Moving forward, do you think he still has it in him to keep this up? Like, is Thomas Vanek back to being the superstar that he was back when he was on Buffalo?
Detroit certainly is fitting him better than Minnesota did, where he lost his superstar status. His numbers are up across the board from his days as a member of the Wild, and he's on a 73-point pace now, which certainly, like, that can't be possible, right? The guy is 33 years old, so you got to step it down a little bit, and maybe 60? Is that crazy? The thing is that he's never had a season with a lower point pace than 60 before he signed with the Wild. So maybe he can get back up there now that he's with a team that is letting him do his thing offensively. He is actually posting the best even strength scoring rate stats of his entire career right now. So can he keep it going is the big question. It's hard to say. Like, my initial thought was, is anyone on Detroit going to score 60 points? So I looked at what other paces are on the team. And the Red Wings, they do score enough goals, I think, for somebody to hit 60 points. Anthony Mantha He's the next best point pace guy at 58, then Zetterberg at 55, then Mike Green at 47, which is better than you probably realize. Lots of Red Wings are quietly doing all right. They're a top 10 team in goals scored per game, and Vanek is helping them with that and also reaping the rewards of that. The concern now is that he's injured and maybe his body isn't holding up. He just turned 33, by the way. Happy belated birthday, Thomas Vanek, from January 19th.
Yeah, he's so old, 33.
Yeah, so we'll see if his body can hold up.
Yeah, meanwhile, I'm falling apart here, but we'll keep going. I guess as you mentioned Mantha, he's actually cooled off lately. He's pointless in his last 4 games now. I wonder, like, is he safe to cycle out now? Is he a cycle guy? Like, everyone who has him added him as a free agent at some point because he was on that amazing hot run. I don't know. How do you decide when it's time to finally let go? He's still on this line with Nyquist and Zetterberg, but it's not like Nyquist is doing anything, and Zetterberg also hasn't been like so fantastic lately. So I'm just curious, as we're looking at free agents, like let's say Jake Gensel shows up, is it time to drop Mantha for Gensel if you have the opportunity to do that, or do you hold on expecting Mantha to bounce back?
You're counting a Detroit game from earlier today in those 4 games, right?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
I just need to get that game. That game's not showing up where I looked first. Huh.
Well, Detroit didn't score any goals.
Yeah, but how many? Did he get some shots?
I think he had 1. Let me check to confirm that. He had a pretty nothing game. He had 1 shot on goal. He only played 13 minutes. So you can mention maybe his ice time was only 13 minutes.
Okay. Okay. All right.
You got this.
I don't know that he's a cycle guy because he just recently had a 5 shot on goal game. However, around that 5 shot game, he has totaled 3 shots over 4 games. So that's reason to cycle him out. You should try and see why he got so few points. You should try and have a look to see why he played less than 14 minutes today, this afternoon against New York. I haven't seen an update about it. And that's the game Thomas Vanek got injured too. So there were more minutes to go around. They did not go to Mantha or Andreas Athanasiou. They ended up going to Justin Abdelkader, I guess, and Riley Sheehan. Anyway, I think he's probably a good guy to own. He certainly seems to be one of the more offensively talented Red Wings. But maybe this is persisting where he can't make a big enough impact on the coaching staff or whatever to let them trust him to consistently have high top 6 forward minutes. Yeah,
also another guy, Darren Helm, was injured for a long time, and he's back. Not that I'm saying he's super relevant. He actually did score a goal in his return on Friday. He had 3 shots on goal today. So I don't know if maybe he's also hurting Mantha, though, they're on different lines. I don't know exactly how that works. And Helm is not seeing the power play time. Mantha still did see top unit power play time and was playing with those good linemen. So we'll see. Maybe he's not a snoozer yet. Like, don't drop him yet, unless you're in a shallowish league. But it's definitely time to be having him on your list of maybe players on the bubble. We'll see if he could do something next week, leading into the All-Star break. One more thing about Detroit. There's been some rumors going around. I know we normally don't want to talk about it. So why don't we just give our general rumor caveat right now as the trade deadline is approaching? People have been saying that Chicago is interested in Nyquist and Tatar, and maybe one of them could end up going there. I wonder, are there any legs to these rumors? Do you have any general ideas of how people can decide whether a rumor is worth giving credence to or whether you should just ignore it completely? Like, I feel like generally Nyquist and Tatar, if they could move to Chicago, that should be good. Like, one of them, right? Because there's this line of Hossa and Taves, or at least there was that line. Hossa was down on line 3 last game for some reason. He still got a million assists. But anyways, assuming that Hossa and Taves are line 1, they need a good left winger, and you could throw Tatar or Nyquist there, and that would probably be a really good situation for those guys. So I would think if that trade did happen that you'd want to add one of those guys just to see how they can do. But in general, what's your thought on these rumors specifically and on rumors in general, I guess?
Well, my thought on rumors in general is that they should come from a reliable source. Like, you should be able to trace it back to a beat writer or somebody who's established themselves as somebody who breaks this kind of news. And the other is that it's still just a rumor. So you could hear the same thing for months or weeks or days or however long makes it worthwhile to you, and then nothing comes of it. So I don't speculate much on what might happen to a player should he be traded to a team that he's rumored to be traded for. It's not something I like to get into too much, But this one, Elon, since it's the first one of the year and you asked so nicely, I actually still didn't really think about it. I just went to look at their cap situations because the Red Wings, they actually lead the league in cap hit by a reasonable chunk. They have $3 million more on their payroll than any other team, which is embarrassing, I think. And Chicago has less than $1 million in cap space. And you look at Tatar, he makes 2.75 this year and then becomes an RFA. And then Nyquist is at 4.75 million for 2 more years. So something doesn't add up here. Like something's got to give. Either Chicago's got to hoodwink Detroit to make that happen and send some really bad contract over that Detroit can still somehow handle because they're over the cap right now.
All right.
So I guess I'm just trying to say that this seems very difficult as a trade that could potentially happen. I don't know how they'd make the financials work. And that is my excuse for not giving it too much thought about what if it happens.
Yeah, and there'll be more rumors, like I said, as the weeks go on. I feel like, if these guys are in free agency, leave them on your watch list. Maybe you've thought, Tatar, forget about him. I'm not even going to be watching him anymore until he does something. Maybe now, be on alert as the trade deadline approaches. If you see a trade happen, I'm saying I would pull the trigger and add one of those guys if that trade did happen, but I wouldn't add them preemptively, as I've seen some people suggesting, should I add this guy now because maybe he'll get traded? I think you could wait. Anyway, okay. Let's now get out of injuries onto outjuries. Next fantasy hockey headline of the week. We got to go to the Rangers. We promised we would talk about him, so let's do it. Zibanejad returned, and he had 2 goals and 7 shots on goal on Tuesday, and then 7 shots on Thursday. Nothing today in a 1-0 overtime win versus Detroit, but Zibanejad playing on a line with Nash and Buchnevich, so it's a line of players who were injured for a while, and now they're all back. Nash, Buchnevich, Zibanejad. I'm sure the Rangers fans are so happy to have their second line back. Also, Zibanejad was on the second power play with Nash, Buchnevich. Zibanejad was on the second power play with Nash, Buchnevich, and JT Miller. So Zibanejad up to 17 points in 22 games on the season. That's a 63-point pace. Fantastic. Of course. Is he that good, Brian? Is Mika Zibanejad someone who could put up 63 points over a full season if he didn't get injured?
This is definitely one of his stronger seasons for shots on goal and shot attempts, and as you said, his scoring. It's his best campaign so far in his career for scoring, so he's definitely earned a bump. 63 points, though, that's a little too far ahead of his career high, 51 points for me. You know what I love to say about every Rangers forward outside of Zuccarello and Stepan, right? 50 points for sure, or that seems likely, and then 55 upside is hopeful for the best of them. I will be generous enough with Zibanejad to put him on the high end of that, but it is important that he does keep getting those shots on goal. He had a quiet period after that huge start he had, and then right before he got injured, he started picking it up again. He also has to hope that Rick Nash can keep getting his nearly 3 shots on goal per game for as long as they're playing together. That's something we chatted about last week. So Zibanejad on his own needs to keep doing things right, and he needs Rick Nash to hold up for the rest of the season. And hopefully Pavel Buchnevich is a really good third piece to that line. I'm still really curious to see what we see from him over the next few weeks because he's been good and then injured, and then good and then injured. So let's see him stay healthy for a month or two.
Yeah, well, so let's check in on Nash and Buchnevich because we mentioned them last week. They had just returned from their injuries. Nash is up to 1 goal and 3 assists in 5 games since returning, 10 shots on goal. So that's behind the pace that you're hoping for, Brian. It's only 2 shots per game. So hopefully Nash could pick that up. Buchnevich still rolling. He has 2 goals and 4 assists in 5 games since returning for 6 points in 5 games. Only 8 shots, though, in 5 games. So he's not a big shooter. 14 points in 14 games, though, on the season, though actually that was before today, so he's finally below a point per game pace. But at this point, I'd be curious to know, do people have to add Buchnevich if they haven't yet? He was actually available in my cupful, Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantrax League division all the way until the weekend, and then he was finally added, and then the guy who added him was actually my opponent this week, and he didn't do anything today, so I was happy about that. I was happy that I passed on him, and that then he didn't do anything today. But I guess if a guy like Jake Gensel is someone people are excited about, I'd be very curious to see what you think about Buchnevich versus Gensel for the rest of the season if you could only have one.
For the rest of the season, I'll take Buchnevich because he's going to be in the bigs for the rest of the season. Don't know that about Gensel. Already talked about how the last time he faded out and then went to the minors. I expect that'll happen when Matt Cullen comes back unless there's another injury, but I feel like I have a lot more faith in Buchnevich being not only with the big league roster, but also in a reasonably well-deployed situation. So I'll take him.
Okay, maybe I should have asked both for the rest of the season and in the short term. If it's Yeah, I guess I should have asked both for the rest of the season and for the short term. If it's just like a 1 week pickup or a 2 week pickup, like you said, a bottom roster spot that you're going to be cycling, do you still say Buchnevich?
Yes, because even in the short term, he still has a better chance of hanging in on a productive line than Gensel does.
Yeah, that's fair. But obviously Gensel does play with Malkin. So I think you could go either way in the short term. I like Buchnevich. I just really don't like Gensel's low shots on goal. And also Buchnevich is getting more power play time. And you always get more chances to score if you're on the power play and if your league counts power play points. A little bonus. That's nice. One last thing about the Rangers. Kevin Hayes got injured today. Not really much impact here because he was already in the bottom six, before he was in the top six, playing with Nash and Buchnevich for that short time before Zibanejad returned. But now that Hayes is in the bottom six, he gets injured. It's not like someone gets to step in to his amazing position on the team. But of course, it's a downer because he's been on such a good hot run. But now he's injured. We'll see how long he's out for. He just got injured today. Let's go to Nashville for our next outry. PK Subban returned on Friday versus Edmonton. He had 3 shots on goal and 2 blocks. He was pointless on 2 blocks. Here, let's see how he's doing today. Nashville's playing today against Minnesota. It's been 1 period and 5 minutes so far, and Subban has no goals, no assists, 1 shot. Anyways, obviously we're just partway through a game here, but Subban basically overall, he's pointless in his last 5 games. Going back to before his injury, only 17 points in 30 games on the season, so he's inching closer and closer to being only a half point per game defenseman. He's supposed to be one of the top offensive defensemen in the league. So Brian, what's going on with PK Subban at this point?
I'm just going to say not much. We talked about him within the last couple weeks, and we talked about how this season has been a disappointing one in relative terms, like from what we expect from PK Subban, but he's still been good enough to hit the low end of the expectations that I'd have for him. All his numbers look pretty good. I imagine he's just going to step in and take the reins, give him some time to come back. That was a long, uncertain break he had, and I think everything is going to go well for any Subban owner who's been patient enough to get that reward that I am sure is coming.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. We'll have to be watching. Like 5 scoreless games in a row isn't like a huge concern, but if that becomes an 8 or 9, then we'll have to talk about him again. So we'll put him on the shelf for now. Let's give a quick Victor Arvidsson alert. He's been back on the top line with Forsberg and Johansson recently, and he actually had 2 assists versus Calgary on Thursday, 1 goal versus Edmonton. This is before he... Oh, wait, no. 1 goal versus Edmonton. Before that, he was on a pointless streak of 4 games. He was still taking shots, but, a lot of people are probably cycling him, just like people are now thinking about cycling Anthony Mantha. Now Arvidsson is back to producing, and he's on that great line. I feel like I would swap Mantha for Arvidsson if I had that option right now. And I'd like Arvidsson over like Gensel and pretty much any of the other guys if he happens to be a free agent in your league, if he got dropped while he was on the scoreless run.
For sure. 100% agree. If he did get dropped, if someone got impatient, this is a good time to add him again, especially if your league counts shots, because even when he wasn't putting up points, he was still helping you in the shots on goal column. And he looks really good too. I know Steve Laidlaw over at Dobber Hockey thinks he's the next Brad Marchand. He showed him fighting off 3 Edmonton Oilers to keep the puck in the offensive zone. And then he ended up circling back around to right in front of the net to put away a rebound to score a goal on the same play. It was a very impressive sequence. Steve posted it to his Twitter, so you can find it there. And Elon, I just want to, before we move on from Arvidsson, you keep saying PK Subban scoreless in 5 or whatever in 8. He's been back for 1 game, and I feel like you need to push the reset button. Like, I feel like it's really painting this as a really terrible picture of what Subban has been doing. He is scoreless in 1 game and 1 period and 7 minutes. That's as far as I'm willing to go.
Okay, so we'll check back in next week, maybe, or in a couple of weeks on Subban. I'm saying I'm not concerned. I agree with you, but something to start watching. Not much you could do if you're a Subban owner. I guess we'll talk about later if this continues, if you need to sell or buy. Obviously, he has an elite pedigree. We assume he'll be fine. We have to give someone like that a long leash and not just go crazy because of a short slump. Just like Matthew in the chat room here is asking me about Panarin's slump. And he's like, oh, are you going to talk about Panarin's cold streak? I love beating up on Matthew in the chat room. He's the guy also who I was beating up for trading Karlsson at some point. But anyways, yeah, like some people are going to have a 3 or 4 game pointless streak at some point, even superstars. It happens. I wouldn't worry about that. You have to give a longer leash to the guys you drafted in the top 3 rounds in your league. One more outjury, Brian. Let's talk about Tyler Ennis, who's back for Buffalo. And that's a name that maybe you haven't heard for a long time, but he's back with the Sabres finally, and he played on the line with Okposo and O'Reilly yesterday. So that's definitely a fantasy relevant place to be. He's been back for 3 games now. He has 1 goal on only 3 shots, so that's not too great. But I'm just curious if he has any value. This is a guy who was a 46-point guy on a brutal Buffalo team a couple of seasons ago. Like, he was the one bright offensive spot, and we thought last year when they started bringing in some big guns that Ennis would be able to benefit and be like an over 50-point guy. Hasn't materialized. He's also been injured all the time, but now he's back on a good line. Should he be someone people are watching?
I guess. I've been watching him for a while. He's not only on my watch list, but on my Fool Me Twice list, which he has done. We've all expected his Tyler Ennis breakout several times over the last little while, and it hasn't come. Sure, last year he missed 60 games, but he was only a half-point per game guy when he did play, and he was nearly always on the ice with either Ryan O'Reilly or Jack Eichel, although lines were in a blender nearly the entire time, so maybe there wasn't enough stability in his line situation to start clicking and get going. I don't know. There's been enough excuses for Tyler Ennis over the years. I don't know if playing with better people helps him or if he's got to be the guy on a mediocre line, which is when he had that 46-point season on a really bad Buffalo team. I'm keeping him safely in my watch list, although as any forward who plays in the top 6, he's worth keeping an eye on in case he does continue getting very good deployment or even better power play time. Let me try that one once more. Or even better power play time.
Yeah, and also I'd like to see a few more shots on goal, Brian. That's one of the things I like when I'm picking up a free agent, seeing some shots on goal.
Let's just get this over with now. You think that I have it wrong about what you like when you're looking. How do you decide who you like as a free agent? If you're deciding between a bunch of guys, I think you think I'm wrong, but I think you like guys who have gone on a short strong run, who are getting good deployment, who are getting minutes on the and that means time in the top 6 and good deployment on the top power play unit as well. Am I missing something?
Well, I don't know. Like, so we were having this conversation earlier today. We were texting, and you were saying Bobby Ryan has 4 points in his last 5, and I was like, whatever. I'm not that impressed. I was actually watching the Sens game yesterday. His goal that he scored was like a tip in. He didn't even like create the play or anything. And then you were like, oh, I thought he's like the type of guy you like. Like, he has 4 points in 5 games. And I was like, insulted, Brian. Like, I'm not one of these Johnny-come-lately fantasy hockey players that, sorts by the previous week and then decides, this guy's scoring well. You got to look into the context. And with Bobby Ryan specifically, yeah, he's on the second line, but he's been there all season, and he's had a bad season. He has 18 points in 38 games. It's not as if he's in a new, exciting situation. It's not like Jake Gensel, who, you get interested in because you see, oh, wow, now in the top 6 before he wasn't. Also, he hasn't been taking many shots on goal. He used to be a shots guy. Now he's not. He's on the second power play. He's not even on the first power play. So I feel like, no, I don't just look at, he has some points over the last week. I want to see the whole picture. Mainly, my things are I want to see some production, I want to see shots on goal, and I want to see like power play time and really good line mates. I'm not really seeing any of those things from Bobby Ryan aside from some points in the last few games.
Okay, but Bobby Ryan has also been just about a 55-point player for the last several years. So when somebody like him, even though the shots are missing, I agree, that's a warning sign to me. But if you compare him to the rest of your free agent pool, like in deep leagues, like my Cupful division, he was available until he got picked up today. But Bobby Ryan on a small role remains a better bet than a lot of the other flash in the pan type and role-playing guys who may be out there for comparison. If you're trying to pick up one guy over the other, it's not every day that you have a guy who was a 55-point scorer as recently as last year and has done it for the last several available as an option over these 40, 45-point guys who just happen to be on a short run or in a good deployment situation because of injuries or just randomness.
You know what, Brian? That's a very good point. Maybe I'm too sensitive.
I think I know what I think you think that I think you only like guys. Actually, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that you think that I think. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I was under the impression that you were saying, you just like guys who are on hot streaks. I like to look deeper. But obviously, you've looked deeper, and you think Bobby Ryan's someone who I should be looking deeper and seeing so many previous years of success. So that means that his hot streak is worth more than someone who's just coming out of nowhere and doing it, which is fair. But he's also been kind of a disappointment for a while. So I'm over him. Yeah. Boring. Don't pick him up.
Yeah, it's been a bad season for him. It's just relative to other free agent upside. He could look like a good ad, but you're right, Elon. He's not doing any of the other things that you'd expect to produce good goal scoring aside from ending up with ones on the score sheet in the goals or assist column for a few games now. And he's not getting that really high end deployment that you could hope for continued. I want to point out, though, like a deflection is still a skilled play. Like he positioned himself. It could have been a set play. That could have been the way the play was supposed to go. I feel like you shouldn't take anything away from him because his goal today was scored on a deflection.
Yeah, that was yesterday, actually. Today, Ottawa lost 7-6 to the Blue Jackets in overtime. So Ottawa scored 6 goals, and Bobby Ryan had no points. So, typical. Let's move on. Okay, so we've got some hot streaks and cold streaks to end the show. Let's start in St. Louis. Everything is upside down in St. Louis. Jaden Schwartz now has 9 points in his last 7 games. Alex Steen has 8 points in his last 7 games. Paul Stastny with 6 points in his last 7 games. So these 3 guys who we've called snoozers or cold streak guys throughout the seasons at different points, now they're doing great. And the one thing we said, the one constant on St. Louis was always, you just want the guy playing with Tarasenko because that's really the person who's going to be helping you get offense. Tarasenko's on the cold streak now. He has only 3 assists over the last couple of weeks, 7 games. Only 3 assists for Vladimir Tarasenko. So I have no idea what's happening there. But I just will say, Schwartz, Steen, and Stastny, they've been on a line together. They're doing great. A lot of people in our Facebook group were very concerned about Alex Steen. I know a couple of people, one in particular I have in mind, dropped him, and I wonder if he's regretting it now because he is doing fantastically. Like I said, over a point per game over the last couple of weeks. Great to see that people playing away from Tarasenko can produce. Now all we need is for Tarasenko to bounce back, and we could have a good team here, except they're going to need some goaltending, and so maybe we should talk about that. But maybe before we do that, Brian, any thoughts on any of these forwards on St. Louis?
Yeah, I mean, the baffling business of being a forward in St. Louis continues. We've got Jaden Schwartz, who's now up to 11 shots in his last 5 games while he's been putting up these points. And that's a small victory because he had so many 1s and 0s in the run up to that. And I'm not sure anything has changed a whole lot. He's just shooting now. Alex Steen, the shots still haven't returned for him, and I don't expect they will. So this could be an opportunity for you to sell high if you weren't able to earlier this year before his value tanked completely. Of course, you won't be able to sell as high as you would have been able to if you tried to get rid of him in the first few weeks of the season, but I wouldn't expect it to. I also wouldn't be foolish enough to expect that he's returning to those levels at the start of season 2. This is just he's getting a couple points. His shots have totally dried up, though, which is the reason a lot of people, including me, like to draft him.
Yeah, but hey, at least he's on that top power play with like Schwartz and Stastny and Tarasenko. I actually posted on our Facebook group, like finally things are at least back to normal in St. Louis. The top power play has been Stastny, Schwartz, Steen, Tarasenko, and Shattenkirk. That's how things should be, right? These are the best guys on the team. Enough of this like Fabry and Perron. Like these are good secondary players, but I'll be curious to see. Obviously, they're going to shake things around all over again. Just like they have with the goaltending. So Jake Allen and Carter Hutton have been brutal. We talked about them last week and how badly they've been playing. Allen actually didn't end up traveling with the team for their game against Winnipeg yesterday. They called up Phoenix Copley to play, and he let in 5 goals on 29 shots. So maybe some people thought, oh, maybe Copley will have a chance to do something. Obviously, I didn't really know who he was, but he didn't prove himself. I don't know if it's the team that sucks or these goalies that just aren't very good, but I guess we're back to square one at this point. Like, is this good news for the Jake Allen owners that at least no one's been able to take the job from him? And since he was the de facto number 1 to start the year, it's sort of like his turn to try to once again be good? Or is it like just drop all the St. Louis guys and forget about it? Like, it's crazy. St. Louis used to be a team where you want to have the starting goalie because they're going to be so good. Even if they're not a good goalie, the team is going to help them play well and get good numbers. Nothing's really changed on the team in terms of the personnel. Like, yeah, they lost David Backes, but overall they have most of the same pieces as last year where Allen and Elliott were both really good. It's like, what's going on with this goalie situation? Do you want any of these guys on your team right now if you can get them? Obviously, you could buy low on any of them right now if you wanted.
I still want Jake Allen just not to be my number 1 or maybe even number 2 guy, but I think at the end of the day, when this all wraps up, this whole goaltending thing, and they somehow get back on track, I think Allen will be the guy in the crease. At least he's the in-house solution, unless they look elsewhere and try and bring in some outside help, as they did a few years back. Do you remember when they brought in Ryan Miller, and they even signed Marty Brodeur a few years ago too? So they have a history of bringing randomly in guys from outside their organization to try and solve goaltending issues. I don't know if that's what happens here. If they don't, Jake Allen is going to be okay. He's always been up and down, but he's never been this far down, and he's never been down for this long. But I'm convinced he's still their best option. They can try to look to Hutton and Copley to see what they've got, but at this point, I don't think those two are as likely to turn in good performances as Allen is.
Copley, eh? Okay, I guess I pronounced it wrong.
I even added the pronunciation to your side.
Look at that. Next hot streak, let's go to Minnesota. Our random red hot Minnesota player of the week is Nino Niederreiter. Out of nowhere, he has 5 goals and 3 assists in his last 6 games. Yesterday, he was playing with Stahl and Coyle, and actually Minnesota's playing today. So let's check out those lines so far. Mid-game, you just go to Dauber Hockey Frozen Pools, and you can see the current line combo is so handy. And yeah, Niederreiter, Stahl, and Coyle have been line 1 today. You've got Granlund. Oh, they've shifted things around quite a bit. Okay, but Parise's been with Haula and Pominville. So that's like the underlying news here is that Zach Parise is not on a great line. Oh yeah, Mikko Koivu's injured. So yeah, Koivu was centering Granlund and Zucker, but apparently he's ill. Hopefully it's just a small thing. Usually when it's an illness, they'll be back the next game or two. But anyways, yeah, Parise's basically on line 3 right now. So that's crazy. So first I'll just talk about Niederreiter. Like I said, he's on a good line. He's basically on the top line right now with like Eric Stahl, who's turned out to be the all-star Eric Stahl that he was a few seasons back on Carolina. And Charlie Coyle's having an amazing season. So it's a great situation for Niederreiter. He's putting up a lot of points. He takes a lot of shots. I think he gets hits in leagues that So if you're in a league that counts that, like just all great news for Niederreiter. I guess the big question is, has he bumped Zach Parise? Like, is Zach Parise not that good anymore? Like, he's actually on a 5-game pointless streak. Sorry, what did I write here? Did he get a point yesterday?
He did, actually.
Oh, that's why I wrote that. Yeah.
You could say he was on a 5-game.
Yeah, I think that's what I meant to write. He was actually on a 5-game pointless streak before yesterday when he got 1 assist. So whatever, yeah, Haula scored a couple of goals and he got an assist on one of them. But yeah, like Parise, 5-game pointless streak before yesterday, even though Minnesota has been scoring a ton of goals and he was on that top line, no more than 2 shots on goal. Also in each of the past 6 games, only 21 points on 36 games on the season, which is only a 48-point pace. So is Zach Parise done? Like, is there a reason to expect him to bounce back now that he's not only slow, but also out of the top 6? And then I guess you could also comment on Niederreiter. I feel like he's someone that you have to add if he's somehow available.
Yeah, Niederreiter would make a great add right now. Going to Parise, though, 1 assist in his last 6 games, it's even more alarming when you realize that the Wild has scored 27 goals in that span. That's 27 goals for the Wild without Zach Parise getting a point on them, or sorry, only getting 1 point by the time it was all over. He has 10 shots in his last 6 games, and that's also alarming. Normally, you could count on him to have nearly double that amount in that much time. Boudreau got mad at him a few games ago when he was playing with Stahl and Pominville for mistakes they made in the third period collapse. And then Boudreau has now just moved on to talking about him working his way out of a slump, how he doesn't actually see Parise's line as being the third line. And we know Minnesota's got a top 9, but it's pretty clear with his line mates that he is not getting the best possible deployment and the best possible place to play with. His time on ice has been below 17 minutes just a handful of times this year, and it's happening recently. And that's something else that's happened recently. Less of a role on the power play this year. He has only 86 minutes with the man advantage so far, which is far off the pace of the 220 plus minutes he saw last year on the power play. The thing is, in the bigger picture, he seems to still be doing most things right. When you look at, say, his shot rates and his shot attempt rates, I think that this is just a funk that he's going to work his way out of. And once he does, then you're looking at Jason Zucker or Nino Niederreiter being pushed out of the top 6, because I think that is his spot. I think he belongs up there. The Parise Stahl Pominville line lasted for a little while. I feel like that makes sense as a line to work together. And speaking, Elon, you brought up Nino Niederreiter as the random red-hot Minnesota Wild. How about Jason Pominville, who we have barely mentioned on the show this year? This might be his first positive mention of the year. 2 goals, 7 assists for 9. 2 goals, 7 assists for 9 points in 8 games and counting. That includes tonight's current game against Nashville. 16 shots in that time, 2 power play assists. Things are going well for him in the top 6 right now.
Well, say it again. He's not in the top 6. Oh, whatever. I'll just respond. Well, I guess like
Wait,
you.
yes, he
Well,
is.
he's on the Parisi line.
No.
Today he's playing with Parisi and
Oh,
Howla.
okay. He hasn't been for a
Okay,
bunch of
that's
time.
okay. I'll say. Yeah, Pominville also out of nowhere doing something. He's more of a boring guy to me. Like I'm gonna have to see a lot more before I get excited about him after he totally let us down over the past couple of years when we were telling people, yeah, he's Jason Pominville, he's good. I wonder if we're gonna get to that point with Zach Parisi. But yeah, right now both of them are playing on a line together with Eric Howla, and Howla, like I said, scored a couple of goals yesterday. So who knows if maybe they could get something going and make themselves more than just a third line. But definitely concerning. Some interesting questions in the chat room, the types that Brian you love. Like someone wants to know, Joey's asking if he should drop Parisi for Anders Lee in a hits league. I know Anders Lee gets some hits. It's a tough one, right? Parisi should be better than Anders Lee. I feel like I wouldn't make that switch unless it's a very shallow league and you can get similar guys like that back because Parisi obviously has more upside. Then a question I was actually going to ask you, Brian, would you drop someone like, or no, I was going to ask you, Brian, who would you like better of, all the guys we've talked about, the Buchnevich? I guess you had him as your top guy right now of the ones we're talking about. Would you rather him or Nino Niederreiter?
I'll take Nino Niederreiter, at least in the short term, just because I know a little bit more about what I'm going to get from him than I do about Buchnevich. I was talking about not seeing a lot, although it is really appealing who he is playing with. I'm not sure which one falls out of their top 6 sooner. I guess that would be what really decides it for me. So maybe I do go back to Buchnevich.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends what you're looking for. Like Niederreiter gives you some maybe more peripherals, but Buchnevich is on the top power play, or not on the top power play, but they sort of run 2 power plays on the Rangers. So I think I would go with Buchnevich as a long-term guy, but maybe Niederreiter if I'm just looking at someone for the next couple of weeks. Okay, next team I want to talk about the Calgary Flames and Dougie Hamilton, who has 8 points in his last 8 games on Calgary. How awesome is Dougie Hamilton? We love him. We've been talking about him forever. Mostly good. He's had little cold stretches over the past couple of years that maybe we've become a little concerned about. But in general, we're always very high on him. And at this point, he's really like breaking out. I feel like at this point, he's the best defenseman on Calgary for fantasy, at least. I think I'd rather Hamilton than Giordano at this point. Giordano has 22 points in 49 games on the season. Hamilton has 30 in 48. So a huge difference in Hamilton and Giordano's output. Maybe you can comment on that. Am I crazy for saying at this point I'm kind of not giving up on Giordano, but I'd like Hamilton more if I had the option?
Not crazy. Mark Giordano, you mentioned the last 8 games, so I'll go with the same time frame. Giordano has 4 points in his last 8, which isn't bad. He had started to bounce back, and this still counts towards that effort of bouncing back from a really tough start that he's had for his owners. It's hard to choose between the two. I may finally lean to Dougie Hamilton since him and Giordano, the plus side for Giordano used to be, well, he's on that top power play unit alone, but he and Hamilton are sharing the same power play duty. But he and Hamilton are sharing the same power play duties on a 3 forward, 2 defenseman setup with the still very hot 3M line when they do get out with the man advantage. So the deciding factor to me between the two is who is the one that potentially supplants TJ Brody on the quote-unquote top unit where there are 4 forwards and 1 defenseman. My money's on Giordano, but the odds are pretty even at this point. And while we're talking about that, Elon, TJ Brody, just 1 assist in his last 9, still had top power play duties heading into their most recent game too. So that situation not working out so well.
Yeah, I actually added Brody in one league, in our league against each other. That was kind of dumb. I am kind of embarrassed to admit I dropped Oscar Clefbaum because I wanted the guy on the power play. That was obviously dumb because Clefbaum's doing really well. I kind of regret this move, but hopefully Subban, now that he's back, and Karlsson, I won't need all these defensemen once everyone is healthy. Anyway, okay, actually on Calgary, a lot of these people are getting points right now. Like Monahan, Backlund, Frolik, Kachuk, they're all doing great lately. One guy who's not doing great on the Flames is Johnny Gaudreau. He just has 2 assists in his last 7 games. So I assume this is just a random slump, like what I just said before about Panarin should obviously apply to Gaudreau. Though, I mean, it can't help that he's playing with Chiasson and Bennett. Like, those were his line mates yesterday. Meanwhile, Monahan gets Versteeg and Brouwer, who aren't too bad, and Kachuk, Backlund, and Frolik are obviously with each other. So Johnny Gaudreau, yeah, on the top power play, but his line mates, it looks kind of like a third line. It's like kind of a Zach Parise situation. What's going on with Gaudreau? Just a random slump, or is it something people should actually be worried about moving forward for the rest of the season?
I don't think this is something to worry about long term. I don't love that he's playing on the third line, but I guess if you want to split Monahan and Gaudreau, you don't have a choice anymore now that you have that 3M line clicking so well. They're off limits, so Monahan is going to get Brouwer and... Sorry, is it Chiasson?
Gaudreau.
Versteeg.
Monahan gets Brouwer and Versteeg.
Brouwer and Versteeg. Brouwer and Versteeg, and Gaudreau gets the rest of the riffraff, which includes Alex Chiasson. And we should point out Sean Monahan doing just fine. 8 points in his last 8 games, 5 goals, 3 assists, and 29 shots in that span.
Yeah, I think in a situation like this, I guess same with Panarin, if someone is really short-sighted, try to buy low on these guys. Like Johnny Gaudreau's amazing. Convince the Gaudreau owner right now that, oh man, look at which line he's on. Send them for the first time the link to Dobber Hockey's Frozen Pools to show them how bad their line is, and then say, and he's doing cold and he's not going to bounce back because now he's on a bad line. Maybe you could get Johnny Gaudreau for a steal. Who knows? If you can't get him now, you probably never can. Okay, a guy on a good line is Frank Vatrano over in Boston, who moved up to the top line and scored 2 goals on 6 shots on Wednesday versus Detroit. So that's pretty amazing for Vatrano, who bumped David Pastrnak, who I'll get to in a second. But, playing with Marchand and Bergeron is obviously an amazing situation. Nothing on Friday versus Chicago. What about today? Nothing on Friday versus Chicago. Oh, yeah. Nothing today versus Pittsburgh, so I wonder how long the situation will last. Brian, are you excited about Frank Vatrano right now as a potential free agent pickup if he's still available? I think he's similar to the Gensels and maybe below the Buchnevic's, but, I think Gensel is a similar guy in a great situation, a rookie. Do you think that Vatrano could hold this spot and produce?
I don't think so. And part of that is because he's not doing much with his time on the top line lately. He had that game where he had 2 goals on 6 shots, and generally he's good for a couple hits and a couple shots, but I feel like there are enough guys outside the top 6 that should be there, namely David Backes and Ryan Spooner, that Vatrano stay, as well as Tim Scalers, whatever his last name, however it's pronounced. I don't know how much longer they stay in the top 6 unless this is some way they think they're balancing their lineup. I wonder if this is at all related to Claude Julien apparently being on the hot seat. That's pure speculation. I think in a normal world, I wouldn't expect Vatrano to be on that top line much longer, especially with another goose egg or 2 going on his game log.
Yeah, they'll probably have to shake things up after a brutal 5-1 loss to Pittsburgh today, though it didn't help that Tuukka Rask left midway with a migraine, and Zach McIntyre is clearly not a very good goalie. Zane McIntyre is clearly not a very good goalie. He led in a ton of goals, and that game just got away from them. But okay, yeah, I mentioned that Pastrnak got bumped because of Vatrano's promotion. So Pastrnak down to line 2 with Krejci, and I'm going to say Schaller. I think it's pretty obviously Schaller. I don't know why it would be anything else, Brian. But anyway, Pasternak's kind of in a slump. He had an assist today, but he hasn't scored a goal since December 14th, which is over a month ago. So that's very concerning for someone who, at one point, people were asking, is Pastrnak going to score 40 this year? He was on that pace, but has completely fallen off of that. He actually only has 8 assists now in his last 16 games and no goals, like I said. So he's been a half point per game guy. I guess, is the Magic season over for Pastrnak? He's down now to 33 points in 42 games, which is a 64-point pace. And falling, though actually I'm not including today's assist. So anyways, around a 64, 65-point pace at this point. What do we expect from him for the rest of the season? Is he a 65-point guy as he currently stands? Is he going to go back to how high he was before, or is he going to fall even further?
Look, he still has 34 shots over his last 10 games and 7 assists as well, so the sky isn't falling. Yes, the goals have dried up, but his shooting percentage on the season is still at 13%, which is now in line with career numbers. Remember that even looking at his shot counts this year, he's made a huge improvement. He's made a huge improvement with his few shots a game that he's getting, or more than that. The last couple of years, he had 2 shots on goal per game only. So more shots, it's still going to mean more goals. I think a 55-point pace would be nice the rest of the way. I still think he could get to 60. A great buy low candidate if you can sell the right guy high, especially.
Yeah, so we've talked about
Alex Steen for David Pastrnak.
Oh, that'd be nice. Yeah, or for Gaudreau, or for maybe Zach Parise. Steen versus Parise. What do you think about that one?
I would prefer Parise. I think he's going to start shooting again, and I really don't think Steen will.
Interesting. Huh, I wonder why. They're both kind of at similar points in their career, I would think. But anyways, actually with Boston, I wanted to mention also Backus. I guess you mentioned that he's been bumped to the bottom three. That he's been bumped to the bottom. And yeah, okay, let me just start that over. And actually, so and And interestingly, since we're still on Boston, like you mentioned, Backus is down to the bottom six. He was playing with Spooner and Riley Nash in the last game. He actually has 1 assist in his last 5 games now. I wonder if we're close to snoozer territory on Backus. So I guess you're saying that you think that Vetrano will get bumped at some point, and maybe Schaller and Backus gets into the top 6. But Brian, we have Backus in our joint league. We recently dropped Jaromir Jagr to pick up Arvidsson, who was dropped, and I definitely don't regret that move. But I wonder if maybe we dropped the wrong guy. We also have Mantha, so I guess Backus and Mantha are our 2 bottom guys. I wonder if maybe Backus is someone we have to look at as on the hot seat, especially since also one guy in free agency who I'm very excited about that I feel like no one gives enough credit to is Tyler Bozak. He's still there in free agency for us. He scored again yesterday. He has 5 goals in his last 7 games. He has 30 points in 41 games on the season, which is a 60-point pace. He's been with JVR and Marner all season at even strength and on the power play. Like, why is he still a free agent in our joint league? Why were you able to pick him up in your Cupful division just this weekend as a free agent? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Brian, should we be dropping Backus for him ASAP next week? Yeah, and your microphone's off. I can't hear you.
Well, Bozak had been recently dropped, so I was just able to jump in on him before I guess anyone else was ready to. Whether I prefer him over Backus, well, Backus on the third line, he's not doing a whole lot. His minutes are down, and the hits also aren't there. So if your league counts those, I mean, I think Backus will eventually start producing those again, but if both are available in free agency, I'd rather go with Bozak until Backus's role increases again. Bozak is actually, he's still seeing the effects of Phil Kessel leaving. Bozak, happily, is still enjoying the effects of Phil Kessel leaving him. It was supposed to be a really bad thing for him, but his own individual shot attempt numbers have gone up in the 2 years since Phil Kessel has left. He's also seeing substantially more unblocked shot attempts for while he's on the ice in the Babcock era than he was seeing in the Carlisle era. He has high shooting percentages, so some regression is due. And he's a funny guy for on-ice shooting percentage. He goes between 6s and 10s with very little in between. Like most players we expect to be 8 or 9. He's currently just shy of 11%, which would actually be just the second highest on-ice shooting percentage of his career. So some regression is due. This run he's on has been fantastic. It's not going to last this way, but he's still going to be a fantasy relevant player for the rest of the season, in my opinion, with the line mates he's getting. One interesting question I thought I'd pose to you, Elon, is would you prefer Tyler Bozak or Connor Brown?
I would take Bozak, I think. I feel like he's on this line. He's doing really well. Yeah, Connor Brown is on the Austin Matthews line, which is amazing. But Bozak's just been so solid for so long. Like, it's not like he's on a 60-point pace due to some amazing surge. Like, yeah, he's kind of surging lately, but he's been just solid all season long. I feel like we're not giving him the credit he deserves. I think he's going to continue to be around this pace moving forward, like maybe a 55-point pace. Connor Brown, I could see him maybe having more upside, but I don't know. I feel like Connor Brown's upside is kind of where Tyler Bozak already is.
Yeah, I guess Bozak, as long as he has great line mates. Connor Brown's appeal is that he gets to play with Austin Matthews, but Bozak seems to be I guess Connor Brown's appeal is that he plays with Austin Matthews, but Bozak can do a little more by himself at this point, and he also has pretty good guys to play with.
Yeah, JVR and Marner is just fine. Like, maybe they're not Austin Matthews, but I feel like James Van Riemsdyk, at least this year, is really, really awesome and at least somewhat comparable to Austin Matthews. And Mitch Marner is definitely no chump. Okay, Brian, let's talk. Oh, okay, Brian. Oh, I always say, okay, Brian. Okay, Brian, let's move over to Edmonton. I wasn't planning on bringing him up, but I guess I have to. Jordan Eberle, 2 goals and 2 assists yesterday versus Calgary. Also had a goal and 1 assist in his last 3 games before that. We talked about him last week as someone we were very concerned about. You said don't worry about it. You were right. Like, it looks like he's good again, though I'm going to suggest that maybe, this game versus Calgary was insane and the goalies were both really bad. Like, both Elliott and Johnson kind of blew it. So I wonder if now's the time to, as fast as you can, try to sell high on Eberle before he starts snoozing again, because I still don't have much faith with him not playing on the McDavid line.
Even after what I said in the last week, or was it the week before?
Yeah, I don't know. I just something about Eberle this season hasn't excited me. But I guess you're right. So you say that you were expecting this, and obviously you got it right so far. You think moving forward, Eberle's going to be just fine and be like a 60-point guy?
Yeah, maybe that's a little high. I mean, the lack of depth and balance on the Edmonton roster certainly hurts him, but I don't think it should be hurting him as much as it has been. I also think you're overstating this episode how often I'm right about things. I think I'm not infrequently wrong, is how I'm going to phrase it. And I think sometimes you're right and I'm wrong. I just want to get that out there. You don't need to defer to me.
All right, well, you're good. I don't know. Okay, well,
You don't need to be. I'll lead in better. Okay. I'm a smart guy, but you don't need to be so deferential.
Fair
Have faith
enough.
in yourself. Have faith in yourself.
Okay, I got it.
Have faith in yourself.
Yeah, I mean, don't be so humble. You're the expert. People are listening to you because they think that you know what you're talking about. And you were right about Eberle, at least for 1 week. Anyone who picked Eberle up or decided not to drop him because of what you said last week obviously has you to thank for all the points that they got recently. And I guess you could go and listen to the previous episode if you haven't, or if you forgot, to hear why Brian thinks that Eberle is still good. Okay, we were going to talk about Bobby Ryan next, but obviously we've done that. While we were on Ottawa, I wanted to mention Mike Condon, who I feel like we blew it with him, right? Like, we assumed he was bad. He was really bad last year on Montreal. Then we saw him going to Ottawa, and he was on a short, good run. And I remember both of us thought, well, I mean, he'll probably blow up. Like, we saw what happened in Montreal last year. But maybe you can't just always be like, we saw what happened last year, so forget about it. Like with Anisimov, I remember we also have a lot of times been like, we saw what happened last year, he can't be good. And actually, maybe we're right about that. So I don't mean to say that's always wrong. Maybe it's not always right, though, because Mike Condon has done really well in Craig Anderson's stead while Anderson's been away. Of course, Condon had a bad game today, so maybe at this point you might say everything is moot. But I wanted to point out, going into today, he had a .921 save percentage on the season, which is very good, helping keep the Sens in the playoff hunt. Word is, though, that Craig Anderson and his .924 save percentage will be back with the team either late January or... Word is, though, that Craig Anderson and his .924 save percentage will be back with the team either late January or early February, and he's going to stay there for the rest of the season. So I wonder what is going to happen with the Ottawa goalie situation. Like, I would think that Craig Anderson just steps in and becomes the number one goalie for sure. But is there any controversy there because of how well Mike Condon has been playing?
No way. Zero controversy, especially for the reasons that Craig Anderson left. I don't think he's going to have to work very hard to earn back his job. Also, because he is the better goalie. The Sens are funny this year because their early success was largely because Craig Anderson was playing over his head. And then when Mike Condon came in, and yeah, we looked at what happened last year. He had a great start with Montreal, and the wheels fell off completely. But that hasn't happened in Ottawa. Like, he's been up and down a few times, but mostly up, and he's stolen some games for them. And of course, today it was a team effort in giving up 7 goals to Columbus. They do seem to have solved some of the defensive issues that plagued the team in the past couple of years, but they still also persist, those defensive issues, to an extent. So the goalies definitely have their work cut out for them. If you're really pumped for Craig Anderson to come back and continue putting up a .924 or whatever he's at right now, I think you really do need to temper your expectations and expect league average goaltending. Anything on top of that is a gift.
Okay, but definitely now is your time to either sell high on Condon or buy low on Anderson if you're in either of those situations and you could benefit, because Anderson's going to be back. And I agree with you, Brian. Like, he's the starting goalie, and Condon, will be a backup. I think he'll play more than, last year Craig Anderson would play almost every game because Ottawa didn't really have a good backup. Hammond, obviously wasn't cutting it. Condon has shown that he is a guy that they could rely on to take the back-to-backs, maybe stave and maybe give Anderson a rest if he's tired, having played a bunch of games in a row. So I don't think Anderson's going to be the workhorse like he was last year. Clearly, Condon has been fine, but I agree with you that Anderson's the for sure number one starter. One more goalie I want to bring up, Brian, before we end the show. Ryan Miller. He's having a fantastic season. He's got a .919 save percentage, 14 wins in 28 games, which is very good considering he's on Vancouver. And I know we got a tweet that one time that we say bad things about Vancouver too much. So I will just say Ryan Miller is fantastic. He's a really good goalie, at least this year. He actually killed me this week in the couple with a 30-save shutout against against Nashville, and then a 34 save 2-1 win over Florida. Of course, my opponent had him. He's also doing well today in a game against Chicago. It's currently tied 2-2, and Miller's got a 929 save percentage going, 26 saves out of 28 shots. You know, Brian, we always have been talking about how he's kind of not good anymore. Like, obviously, he used to be really good. I remember him on Team USA really helping that team be good in the Olympics and whatever. But, like, is it possible that Ryan Miller is good again, or is he someone who you expect to totally blow up before the end of the season?
Short answer, Ryan Miller, not actually good again. He has definitely beat back Jacob Markstrom, though. Markstrom was challenging for a bit and getting some games, and now Markstrom gets a game each week if he's lucky. So if you've been holding Markstrom, it might be time to let him go and just wait for his next opportunity to shine once Ryan Miller does come down from his current high.
But why do you say that he's not good? You got to give me a reason.
Oh my God.
Well, I mean, he's doing so well. You can't just be like, no, he's not good. He's got 919 save percentage on the season. That's above league average.
But like, you've co-hosted this show with me for the last 4 or 5 years, right? Or however long it's been.
Yeah, but not everyone who's listening has listened to every single show.
Okay, fair enough. I don't know. He's just not a good goalie. He's been league average, I guess, and right now he's 919, which would be his highest end of season save percentage. If the season ended today, that would be his highest end of season. That would be his highest save percentage to end a year in the last 6 years, and would actually be the second highest season-ending save percentage of his career, which is a hard thing to believe about Ryan Miller, who a lot of us, thought is this super rock steady guy in Buffalo. But he's never quite been as good as he's been made out to be. And I think that's especially the case as he is now 36 and a half years old. So I think he's been really fortunate to put up a 919, and last year he put up a 916. So maybe I don't give him enough credit for that. Ryan Miller is still a decent NHL goalie. How about that?
Well, you started this rant saying he's a bad goalie. You've upgraded him to a decent NHL goalie. I think that's fine. That means that I kind of blew it for not picking him up in the couple when he was dropped earlier this year, because I could have used a decent NHL goalie. But anyways, I think you're also saying that if people have him and they're excited about him right now, maybe it's time to sell high, because maybe this current run is not sustainable. So see what you can get for Ryan Miller right now before it's too late. The Lundqvist owner is probably freaking out, even though Lundqvist got a shutout today. So I wonder if the door is closed there. But I wonder if you could pull something off like that with Ryan Miller.
I wonder if you might feel more urgency to do it if you happen to own Cam Ward and go find someone in your league who has not been paying attention. Cam Ward, just one start in his last 10 games that's been above a 917 save percentage. 6 of those last 10 have seen him finish the game with a save percentage below 890. If you've been relying on Cam Ward to get you through your goalie categories all year and have been fortunate enough to have him carry you to the top of your standings or into contention, and you think that's just going to be your plan for the rest of the season, your chickens may be coming home to roost. It might be time to really explore how you are going to survive a potential Cam Ward meltdown. Or should I just say a potential return to Cam? Or should I just say Cam Ward? Or should I just say a potential return to Cam Ward for Cam Ward? A return to being Cam Ward for Cam Ward.
Can you go back from "or should I say" or whatever?
Or should I say a potential return to being Cam Ward for Cam Ward?
I could tell you really wanted to get that out. It's very clever. Okay.
It was not even. I backed myself into a corner with sentence construction.
Well, obviously the thing with Cam Ward is, as bad as he plays, there is nobody else that could play instead, because Eddie Lack has obviously been bad. Even though we haven't seen him come back to actually play a game since he was healed from his concussion. I think he's injured again. Michael Layton was called up recently. I don't expect much from him. So Cam Ward's going to be your workhorse starter. If you're in a league that counts saves, probably not many people better than Cam Ward for that category. But yeah, obviously he's on a very cold run right now. Ryan Miller or Cam Ward for the rest of the year?
Carolina's going to win more. Ryan Miller will probably put up better numbers. So take the one that meets your needs the best, depending on your format.
I'd go with Miller. for what it's worth.
Good. Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, this has been a great episode. I've been having a lot of fun. Hopefully you listening enjoyed it and found some good tidbits of players you might want to add or consider dropping from your teams. You are heading into the Fantasy Hockey Playoffs, and we will be right there with you all the way through it all. So definitely, subscribe on iTunes. We're going to keep doing this every Sunday to the end of the season. If you like the show, tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson. Let us know. Follow us, all of that stuff. You can give us a 5-star review on iTunes. We'd love that. For the patrons, we've got a patron cast this Thursday. It's going to be a lot of fun. For those of you who don't know, we have this patron program. You could sign up to be a member for $5 a month. You support the show that you're enjoying, and also you get great perks like joining our patron-only Facebook group and having access to our monthly patron casts where we do a whole episode just like this, except instead of me planning the show, the patrons give me the questions, and then Brian and I discuss them while I drink some beers. Always a lot of fun. That's going to be this Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern time, so it's not too late to sign up to become a patron in time to have access to that patron cast. But with that, Brian, let's cue the outro music. And why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
I will. I'm scrolling. All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson podcast was presented by Dabra Hockey and support.
Started again. You sort of had a bad blip at the start of that. I don't know what it was. Some sound thing.
This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dabra Hockey and supported by our patrons, including some of our newer ones. Jordan, Sniped It, a couple guys named Chris, and Gabriel. Thank you so much for your support. This episode was researched with help from Dabra Hockey, Frozen Pool, Corsica, Hockey Analysis, Hockey Viz, Hockey Reference, Hockey Database, puckon.net, Elite Prospects, Roto World, and Fantrax.
Great job as always, Brian. Thanks to everyone who joined us in the chat room, and we will catch you all again next week, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, keepingkarlsson.com/live. Until then, what should people do, Brian?
I believe they should keep on keeping Karlsson.
Peace. I don't know. Okay. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Hope you liked it. I definitely, Matthew asked if I cut the show while we're recording it.
That would be great.
Could you imagine? What a world.
That would be amazing.
Then I could just go to bed right now. Or eat lentils like you.
Oh, man. All right.
Are you losing your
next
couple matchup?
No, I'm still up by 2 save points and by 0.002 save percentage. So 2 more saves from Kemper, and I've lost 2 categories.
Well, he'll definitely
but 1 more goal against, and I'm good.
Yeah, he'll definitely make at least 2 saves. So it's basically just whether or not he's going to let in a goal or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Fortunately, the Nashville scored at least 1, so that helps me secure goalie points. But I'm not feeling great. I'm feeling great about sitting Rene.
Yeah, I guess that was smart.
It.
I mean, he's letting 2 goals. It's not so bad.
Well, on 12 shots, on 14 shots.
Oh, that's not good. And sorry, what else were you gonna say for next week?
I was gonna say next week I plan to not be away anywhere and to have an appropriate amount of rest.
Oh, you're tired?
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to being back at 100%.
This wasn't you were great. You weren't even 100%.
Thank you. I have to be self-effacing, I suppose. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Okay. See you, everybody.